Chapter 54. After he was done sleeping, Silin got up and opened his communicator. There were more than 30 missed calls, and all of them were from the same person. Looking at the time, they were all called during Silin's usual rest hours. But this time, Silin had slept for 2 whole days, and his communicator was turned off. Looking at the number and the meaning reply as soon as you see this messages, Silin was puzzled. What the hell was this guy up to this time? However, Silin still dialed the number at the first opportunity. The call was swiftly connected without waiting, and Knight's haggard and aggrieved face appeared on the interface. Silin nearly spat out a mouthful of water he was drinking. Just how wronged must he be to make Knight, a man who usually acted like he was number one in the world, say something like this? Well, no. I'm being bullied. Bullshit, who would dare bully you? Who in the entire 7 Lights could bully you? Get to the point. After Knight's explanation, Silin finally understood why this guy had called more than 30 times. Knight ran into his old friend Stantine of the 2nd Military Academy when he was doing warm-up training on the Sector Championships platform. However, Stantine and another student of the 2nd Military Academy were defeated by the Visby brothers of the 4th Military Academy during warm-up training, and it stirred up Knight's fighting spirit. However, Knight really couldn't find anyone he liked to team up with in 7 Lights because the Visby brothers only participated in the less popular double matches and not the popular single matches. The first person Knight thought of was Silin, but Silin's communicator was turned off, and he didn't reply to his messages either. He tried looking for Ci Jincheng and Lung, but neither of them were free. Certain hard? Their abilities were still lacking. Pride? No way. Knight felt that if pride went, he might not be able to stop himself from fighting all 3 of them at once. It was better to go with Silin. And so, the communicator was turned off after the first call. The second call was turned off, and the third call was still turned off. Knight had endured from yesterday until today, and his face was haggard. He wanted to go to the research division several times, but if he did, Mo Heng would probably leave both of them there. If that was the case, then he really wouldn't have any chance at all. The Sector Championship was about to officially begin, and the registration for some of the smaller competitions ahead of it was the first to open. There were 2 days, yesterday and today, so it was no wonder that Knight was in such a hurry. Silin was amused by Knight's aggrieved look. Alright, I just got a few days off. I'll go with you to meet the twins. Knight's eyes lit up when he heard Silin's words. The haggard look on his face disappeared as if he had been injected with chicken blood. Brother, you'd better come back soon. The registration ends tonight. I'm going to send the duel invitation right now. Beep. Silin was speechless as he stared at the disconnected communicator. Just how thirsty was this guy? After stretching, washing up and tidying up, Silin walked out of Mo Heng's workshop. After sleeping for 2 days, he was hungry. Looking for food was his top priority. As he walked to the research division's cafeteria, a student who did not look well greeted Silin weakly. What's wrong, Sing? You don't look too good, Silin said. Sing was about the same age as Silin. He was a specially recruited first-year student, but he basically did not go to class. He spent most of his time in the research division working on projects. Don't mention it. Poor bowel movement. I bring shit to work. Sing had always felt that working in the research division was just like going to work. He had to clock in, work on projects, and get paid. He was like an office worker. Sing, this is a cafeteria. Can't you be a little more refined? Someone beside him spat out his orange juice and glared at Sing. Sorry, I have to be considerate to someone with periodic constipation. Sing made an apologetic gesture and left the cafeteria. Silin smiled and shook his head. This guy was famous for his periodic constipation. After looking for food, Silin returned to his workshop to pack up and get ready to return to the dormitory. As he was packing, Ling Long came over. After entering, Ling Long asked in a small voice, "There's no one else here, right?" "No, the surveillance wasn't turned on either. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to take over a man?" After eating and sleeping, Silin was in a much better mood and joked around more. Ling Long curled her lips. After closing the door, she crossed her arms and looked at Silin with a sneaky smile. How would I dare to take over Shadow X, Silin was surprised. Ling Long's words were very certain. There was not even a hint of speculation in them. How did she know? The information protection measures on the platform were done by him personally. Ling Long looked straight at Silin. Whether you swim in the water or fly in the sky, whether you are ugly or beautiful, I can always recognize you at first glance. Silin smiled when he heard this. Levine's Colors, Chapter 7, The Butterfly and the Dragonfly. You read Levine's books too? Ling Long's eyes shone, as if she had finally found a friend after traveling thousands of mountains and rivers. Very few people read Levine's fantasy fairy tales with a more artistic style. I didn't expect you to read them too, and remember them so clearly. Silin didn't say anything. Chapter 7 of Levine's Colors was about a butterfly and a dragonfly. There was a very large tree by the stream. Its thick branches stretched across the stream. A very disgusting caterpillar was lying there eating leaves. The branch was very close to the water, and after eating its fill, it climbed up the leaf and looked at the water below on a whim. Through the reflection of the water, it saw an ugly and ferocious-looking insect below the water, and that insect also saw it. For a period of time, the caterpillar ran over every day, and every day, the insect under the water would wait for it at the same place below the water. Days passed, and the caterpillar was about to turn into a cocoon. That day, it ran to the same place and glanced at the insect under the water, then climbed to a place on the tree where its companions were turning into cocoons. The day after the caterpillar left, the insect under the water climbed out and attached itself to a plant that was exposed above the water. Many of its kind also climbed out along the water plants, and their bodies began to change. When the caterpillar broke out of the cocoon and flew out as a butterfly, it immediately returned to the original place, but there was no sign of the insect under the water. It was very dejected, and flew with its companions to a flower field not far from where it was. There were colorful flowers everywhere, and all sorts of butterflies, dragonflies, bees, and so on. It was very lively. The butterfly flew, and when it passed by a patch of irises, its gaze fell on a purple iris. There was a dragonfly there, flapping its wings, and its thin wings reflected a metallic glow under the sunlight. At the end of The Butterfly and the Dragonfly, Levine wrote a paragraph as usual. One of the lines was, whether you swim in the water or fly in the sky, whether you are ugly or beautiful, I will always be able to recognize you at first glance. Do you believe Levine's words? Exquisite asked. I don't know, Silin answered. But Hannah believed that she liked this fairy tale very much, and that was why Silin remembered it. Exquisite glanced at Silin. You don't believe it? Jumping onto the table at the side, Exquisite shook her legs like a child. There are many unreasonable things in fairy tales, but I agree with Levine's words. Turning around, Exquisite looked at Silin seriously. I knew it was you the moment I saw Shadow X. Silin's back was sweating. Was this a confession? Fortunately, Exquisite did not dwell on this. She took out the microcomputer from her bag, turned it on, logged into the Sector Championship platform, and pulled up the Sector Championship forum. Look, Shadow X, you're famous. Chapter 55. Silin rarely fought on the Sector Championship's platform to begin with, fighting only once a day. This was already enough to make a lot of people want to throw a tantrum, and this time, Shadow X disappeared for 3 days in a row without accepting a single challenge. Some people could not help but come out to criticize him. On the Sector Championship forums, a lot of people had posted their challenge requests right away, openly challenging Shadow X. Most of these people were from the military academies, and most of them were A-rank genotypes. The challengers were all A-rank geniuses from military academies. A military academy's A-rank genotype actually dared to openly challenge a B-rank genotype student of a Sector B academy? Moreover, all 4 military academies were like this, completely unafraid of being laughed at by others. Everyone could not help but wonder just what kind of divine being Shadow X was that he could actually force those military academy students who usually look down on the other sectors into such a state? Shadow X had only appeared for 3 days, and these 3 days were not long at all. However, that generic robot appearance of his had already become a major characteristic, and at the same time, it also caused a lot of people to feel helpless. There was information about Shadow X on the forums. It was a generic robot image and a simple and monotonous list of information. Male, 7 lights, rank B genotype, 3 wins and 0 losses. That was all. It was so simple that it was mysterious. After Shadow X's first battle against Tusk, the number of people following him exceeded 10,000. After his third battle, his name became famous throughout the entire Sector Championship platform, and the number of people challenging him had reached 5 digits. Most of them were military academy students of Sector C. The number of people following him had reached 6 digits and was growing rapidly towards 7 digits. This was an unprecedented situation. Since Shadow X had not logged onto the Sector Championships platform for 3 days, someone jumped out to accuse Shadow X of acting like a big shot. Putting on airs? If you have the guts, come and play with me. The people of 7 Lights immediately responded. The people who used to accuse Shadow X of corrupting the school's reputation had also changed their stance. Right now, Shadow X was 7 Lights' treasure. There were also those who said that Shadow X was deliberately avoiding the battle, but this voice did not last long before it was scolded down by the other armies, especially those few people in the military academies whose words carried a lot of weight. They believed that Shadow X had something to do and had not logged into the Sector Championships platform for the time being. There were people from 7 Lights who had specifically made a list of 7 Lights' first-year students who were stronger than the rest and whose genotype was at rank B, and Silin's name was among them. It was just that he had been eliminated in the first round of screening. A person who had just recovered from a serious illness could challenge someone from a military academy right after being discharged from the hospital? No one would believe it. Moreover, some of the trainees from the training division said that Silin's marksmanship was not bad, but in terms of individual combat ability, they did not know. After all, he was ranked last among the 5 trainees who participated in the mission. However, after many rounds of screening, they could not find a single person who could possibly be Shadow X. One of the threads speculated that perhaps Shadow X was not a freshman at all. There was no information about his year in his information at all, so he could not be identified as a freshman just because it was his first time registering on the Sector Championships platform. It should be known that there were plenty of amazing people who had missed out on the Sector Championship due to certain missions during their freshman years. As soon as this post was posted, many people responded to it. In short, there were all kinds of opinions. Therefore, when Silin looked at the Sector Championship forum page that Exquisite had opened, he was also stunned. He had not expected that just 3 days of contact with the Sector Championship platform would result in such an effect. That's why I said, Shadow X, you're famous now. Exquisite looked at Silin. What do you plan to do? Let's talk about it later. Anyway, I have a few days off. I'll log in today and check out the situation. I don't know how many challenge requests you've received, but the Sector Championship is about to officially begin. Are you going to participate in the minor tournaments before this? Minor tournaments referred to those single or 2-man tournaments, while major tournaments referred to those that were conducted by teams. Regardless of whether it was a minor tournament or a major tournament, it had nothing to do with the popularity of the tournament. For example, the single combat tournament was more popular, and the audience would always be packed to the brim. The 2-man tournaments, on the other hand, were a little colder, and the chances of stars appearing were not as high as the single combat tournament. You want to know? Silin stood up and packed his backpack. Let's wait until tomorrow. Exquisite wrinkled her nose in dissatisfaction and snorted softly. Stingy. She put away her microcomputer and even made a face at Silin before she left. After Exquisite left Silin's workshop and walked out of the Institute of Mechanical Engineering, she saw someone standing in the hallway not too far away. She was still dressed in the same refreshing attire as before. It was not flirtatious, but it gave off a very dazzling feeling. Teresa did not turn around to look at Exquisite. She was still looking at the distant scenery with a smile on her lips. When Exquisite saw Teresa, there was none of the playfulness she had in Silin's workshop just now. Her deep amber eyes were filled with coldness, so coldness that Teresa could clearly feel her killing intent. You know, there's someone else in Silin's heart. Even so, it won't be you, Teresa. Exquisite had always called Teresa by her name. Teresa did not mind either. She only smiled lightly as she felt the breeze blowing over. Teresa, I don't care what kind of deal you have with Sillin. If anything happens to Sillin, I won't let your galwa get away with it. With just you? Or your background? Teresa played with her hair that was blown up by the wind. It seemed that she did not take Exquisite's words to heart at all. Exquisite looked at Teresa and suddenly smiled mockingly. Teresa, you always think you're very smart. She then left without looking back. On the same day, when Sillin returned to the dormitory, Knight was still the only one there. Seeing that Sillin had returned, Knight no longer cared about the matters on the Sector Championship platform. He urged Sillin to log into the Sector Championship platform and sign up. When Sillin logged in, Knight ran back to his bedroom and brought his microcomputer over. Registration required 2 people to enter their information at the same time. For convenience's sake, Knight directly brought his own equipment over. However, when Knight saw the screen that popped up on Sillin's microcomputer, his mouth dropped wide open. On the screen in front of Sillin, an unusually familiar-looking generic robot was swaying back and forth. The name displayed was Shadow X. Sillin, what? Fuck you. Knight rushed over and strangled Sillin's neck. I didn't expect you to be the mysterious generic Shadow X that spread all over the Sector Championship platform, the one who single-handedly provoked the war between 4 military academies. How dare you hide it from us for so long? Sigh, it's not like you asked me. Hurry up and sign up. Registration is more important. That's right, I'll let you go today. Next time I'll let you know the consequences of lying to us. You're a great man, please forgive me. I'll treat you to crabs next time. Don't give me that kid. I'm telling you. Fuck, I want to eat fresh, live, and unexperimented crabs. As expected of a glutton. Sillin only took a glance at the unread numbers in his message box and inbox before he stopped looking at them. That number, it was a lot. Although he had logged into the Sector Championship platform, he was in stealth mode. He could neither fight nor train. Of course, it was still possible to sign up. Knight's ID was simply Knight. Knight was quite famous on the Sector Championship platform, and many people in the military academies knew him. Moreover, Knight was ranked first among this batch of 7 Light's new students in terms of individual combat strength. Of course, he received a lot of attention. However, when Knight's and Shadow X's names appeared in the participant list of the Double Combat Tournament, the entire Sector Championship platform boiled over. Just how big of a wave would this duo cause? Chapter 56. The Sector Championship was very open, fair, and free. Everyone who signed up would be recorded and made public, and anyone who logged onto the Sector Championship's platform would be able to look it up. This way, if they saw someone they wanted to challenge, they could also sign up and participate. In the past, the single combat tournament was the most popular of all small-scale competitions. It was very easy to stir up the students' blood. Everyone hoped that they could become a domineering figure who could single-handedly defeat tens of thousands of opponents. With such glory and standing in the limelight, who would be willing to share it with another person? But this term was different. When the duo of Knight and Shadow X appeared on the participant list, the entire Sector Championship platform's situation began to change. The single and double combat competitions were held at almost the same time. Students would usually only participate in one of them. At the same time, it was also a more comprehensive assessment of each school's combat strength. Due to the sudden discovery of the duo's name on the list of participants, many students who had already signed up for the single combat competition also signed up for the double combat competition. As a result, the number of people signing up for the double combat competition exceeded the number of people signing up for the single combat competition. Fortunately, it was a virtual platform. It could provide multiple match points to start at the same time, so it would not cause a situation where too many people could not participate. There was no upper limit to the number of participants in the small-scale competition. This was also a major feature of the Sector Championships platform. Inside the 3rd Military Academy's gravity training room, Faradin was fighting against someone. The blurry shadows of fists and the banging sounds of fists and kicks clashing against each other rang out incessantly. It was obvious that Faradin was slightly inferior to the opponent, and he was having a bit of a hard time dealing with the fists that were coming his way. To be able to maintain such a high speed in such a gravitational field, it had to be said that the two of them were quite outstanding. Bang! Faladin took a few steps back, swung his arms that blocked the kick, and said with some annoyance, "I missed another move." "It's fine. You're already very outstanding. No one in the first years can block so many of my moves." After fighting for such a long time, Faradin's opponent actually didn't sweat much, and his slightly hurried breathing soon calmed down. Faradin looked at the other party, and said for the umpteenth time, "Boss Boar, I really want to see your duel with Shadow X. It must be very exciting." Standing not too far away, Boar relaxed his muscles and shook his head. "Shadow X is too mysterious. Many of the people I know have sent him war invitations, but none of them have responded. Who knows what kind of god he is? But I suggest you meet Nate when the time comes. Seven Lights Knight? He seems to be quite famous. I heard from my dorm that he's also a freshman." Ever since he lost to Shadow X, Faradin hadn't paid much attention to anyone else. He usually only learned about them from others. Knight could have come to the military academy, but somehow he ended up at Sector B. However, his strength cannot be underestimated. "Do you know Nate's full name?" Faradin shook his head. "Knight's full name is Fiegler Knight. Thunderstorm Fiegler?" Faradin was immediately interested. That kid hasn't used Thunderstorm Punch since he entered the Sector Championships platform. Faladin rubbed his fists and feet. He will definitely meet him when the time comes. He should be participating in the single combat tournament, right? It should be. DDD. The emergency pager on the wall of the training room rang. Communicators were not allowed in the gravity training field, so both of them had their communicators turned off. If there was an emergency, they would use the special pager on the wall to transfer the call. Boar walked to the side, removed the gravity field, and connected the pager. "What happened?" "Boss Boar, there's big news on the Sector Championship platform. Knight and Shadow X have teamed up and signed up for the double combat tournament." Faradin, who was putting on his jacket, pricked his ears and lost control of his strength, tearing his jacket into two pieces. Faradin didn't care about his jacket either, and simply tossed the two pieces to the side before running to Boar's side like a wisp of smoke. His ears were pricked up, afraid that he would miss a single word. When the other was done, Faradin was so excited that he couldn't wait to run back and sign up for the double combat tournament immediately. After the communication was cut off, Boar was silent for a moment before asking Faradin, "Is Shadow X really that strong?" Faradin's expression immediately turned incredibly serious. "He's very strong. I don't know how strong he really is, because I feel that he didn't use his full strength at all when he fought me. Also, I felt like I was being led by the nose from the beginning to the end. That last strike, just one strike alone, could have killed me at my peak." After hearing Faradin's words, Boar laughed out loud. "That's good. Faradin, let's go meet Shadow X and Thunderstorm Knight." "Boss Boar, you're going too? Didn't the instructors say that you're going to fight Kamas for the championship of the single combat tournament this year?" Although Faradin was very tempted by Boar's suggestion since Boar was the runner-up of last year's single combat tournament and his strength was there for all to see, and he had also gotten familiar with Boar's sparring sessions over the past half a year. Forming a pair to fight in the double combat tournament was definitely possible, but the instructor's words were in front of him, and he couldn't go back on his word. The instructor also said, "Isn't the purpose of a combat platform to fight to your heart's content? What's the point of having so many false reputations?" Faradin pressed his fingers together and muttered inwardly, "The instructor's bullshit of false reputations are meant for us inside the 3rd Military Academy, but the false reputations outside the 3rd Military Academy are very important to them because those are related to their welfare. Otherwise, they'd punish us to run around the field naked." Not long after the duo of Knight and Shadow X appeared on the double combat tournament name list, the 3rd Military Academy's Boar and Faradin duo brought everyone's attention to the double combat tournament once more. Half an hour later, at almost the same time, the 2nd Military Academy's Ryan and Bond duo, as well as the first military academies Kamas and Feng Haichao duo, set off the third climax of this term's double combat tournament. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that this time's double combat tournament was filled with glittering stars. Last term's double combat tournament champions, the Visby brothers, Thunderstorm Knight and the much-anticipated Shadow X. Last term's second place in the single combat tournament, Boar and the second military academy's Rising Seed Faradin. Last term's fourth place Ryan and Bon, who was rumored to be stronger than Ryan but had missed last year's tournament due to a mission. Last term's single combat tournament champion Kamas and Feng Haichao, who was rumored to also have missed last year's tournament due to a mission but was no weaker than Kamas. Looking at it this way, other than the fourth military academies. Valente, who shared second place with Boar in last year's single combat tournament, 3 of the top 4 contestants of last year's single combat tournament had appeared on the double combat tournament's name list. The Sector Championships platform went completely crazy. Since the top few of Sector C's 4 military academies were participating in the double combat tournament, the other academies naturally couldn't be left behind. Although from a strategic point of view, the best way would be to avoid a tournament where experts gathered and participate in another tournament. From a personal perspective, this time's double combat tournament held too much significance. They hadn't seen such a scene for many years, or at least in all the years that they knew of, there had never been a double combat tournament that could attract the top geniuses from all over the world. But this time was different. If they missed it, who knew how many years they would have to wait to encounter such a situation again? If they missed it, they would regret it. Since they didn't want to regret it, of course they had to sign up. Because of the matter of signing up for the double combat tournament, the faces of every academy's higher-ups darkened. They couldn't stop the students from signing up even if they wanted to. Spittle flew everywhere, and using both carrot and stick, these little fellows still eagerly signed up. It truly infuriated the higher-ups of the academies. The night of the registration deadline was a crazy night. Whether it was the electronic publication responsible for reporting or the students who didn't sign up due to their limited strength, everyone was so excited that they couldn't sleep well for the entire night. On the other side, Sillin, who was about to sleep and rest, and Knight, who was still fighting on the sector championship platform, were simultaneously pulled back to their senses by a fatal series of calls. Sillin pressed the accept button. "Where's Soulseeker? You could have just dialed our numbers, but why the hell are you dialing all 5 communicators installed in the dormitory at the same time? Are you calling the police?" "Sillin, Knight, just you wait for me without any sense of loyalty. I'll return to the dormitory immediately. Don't fall asleep, I'll drag you out even if you fall asleep." Lung roared loudly from the other side of the communicator. Chapter 57. Although Lung had never had the time to participate in the sector championship, he had always been paying attention to the happenings on the sector championship platform. Before this, he did not dare to confirm whether or not Shadow X was Sillin, but when Knight and Shadow X's team appeared on the registration list to participate in the double combat tournament, Lung knew that Shadow X must be that bastard Sillin. That was why he immediately dialed Sillin and Knight's communicator numbers at the same time. Just in case, he dialed the other 5 public communicators in the dormitory at the same time, treating it as an alarm. The moment Lung entered the dormitory, he saw Sillin and Knight sitting in the living room with their legs crossed waiting for him with dark expressions. Judging from their expressions, if he did not give an explanation, he would probably have to sleep on the streets today. Before coming, Lung had already planned everything out. First, he had to apologize and calm the other party's anger first. Pastry from a newly opened pastry shop. There are meat and fruit fillings, kept in a fresh-keeping box, still crispy. Oh, and 2 cups of hot milk tea. Eating pastry and drinking milk tea, hee, not bad. Lung handed Sillin and Knight a cup of milk tea each, and then took out a cup for himself. Based on Sillin's understanding of Lung, he definitely wouldn't have thought of buying milk tea. Even if he did, he would have bought alcohol instead. Adding other factors into the equation, there was an 80 to 90% chance that these 2 cups of milk tea had been gifted to Lung when he bought the shortbread. As for the 3rd cup, it was probably Lung who had used his characteristics to shamelessly ask for it. Seeing Sillin and Knight start eating the pastry and milk tea, Lung relaxed a little. Now, he had to seize the initiative. Just as Knight was about to open his mouth while chewing on the pastry, Lung quickly put down his cup and reprimanded them righteously. You guys didn't discuss such an important matter with me. Do you know that you're not fighting for a competition, but money? Money. Sillin and Knight. Knight's mouth was still open, and he ignored the pastry crumbs that leaked out. Lung turned on his microcomputer, opened it to a certain page, enlarged the screen, and pointed at it to explain, there are also bets on the sector championship platform, officially organized. As he spoke, their communicators and the 5 public communicators in the dormitory rang at the same time. Looking at the name displayed on the communicator, Sillin face-bombed. Why did they all like to play this trick? After the call was connected, C.I. Jincheng's image appeared on the screen. He was still wearing his work clothes and his workshop was behind him. As I thought, you guys are discussing a scheme. C.I. Jincheng said as if he had expected this. Isn't it impossible for your base to communicate with the outside world? Also, isn't Seven Lights unable to casually communicate with the outside world? Lung asked. C.I. Jincheng said disdainfully, that's for normal people, it's useless against me. What were you talking about just now? Start over again. Alright, since everyone's here, I'll tell you all about my grand plan. Lung cleared his throat and told them about the bet. After listening, Knight said hesitantly, but sometimes, it's not something we can control. For example, if we meet those people from the military academies, they'll fight very hard, because their battle results will affect the welfare of their instructors or instructors. If the welfare of the higher-ups is affected, those kids won't feel good either. They'll definitely fight with all their might, and if that's the case, we won't be able to control the time well. They haven't joined the League of Stars yet, right? Also, what are the welfare of their instructors and instructors? As far as I know, the military academy's instructors and instructors all have very high military ranks, and they definitely get a lot of money. Lung was puzzled. Knight shook his head and showed them with his fingers. Sector C's military academies are affiliated to the League of Stars' military. They're a little different from the military academies of the other sectors. Every student from Sector C is an absolute elite, not to mention those top students have been reserved by the garrison since a long time ago. For example, 1st Military Academy's Feng Haichao, 2nd Military Academy's Ban and the others had started carrying out missions a long time ago, so there was no need to worry about their future after graduation. However, some of the military academy's instructors and instructors are different. There's a word called banishment. They're all Galactic Army field officers, but some of them are in Sector A, B, C, some are transferred to the 10 trade sectors, and some are banished to the 13 backward sectors. As a soldier, are you willing to lead the troops to encircle and annihilate the galactic robbers and sector rebellions, or are you willing to lead the troops to open up new wastelands? At the same time, Sillin Helong had a look of realization on his face. So there were so many hidden meanings behind the welfare the military academy spoke of. But I believe that Sillin and Knight can take care of them. C.I. Jincheng said confidently. Duh, I believe that too. Otherwise I wouldn't have abandoned my business over there and rushed over here overnight. Lung looked at Knight and Sillin expectantly. Knight rubbed his chin. Although he was frowning, the upturned corner of his lips could not hide his true thoughts. This is a very challenging matter. However, he liked this kind of extremely challenging matter. The trio looked at Sillin. Sillin slowly put down the cup in his hand. There is a certain degree of difficulty. Although he said so sharply, he still took out his card and passed it to Lung at the same time. Lung took it knowingly. How much are we betting? Everything. As long as I don't say anything, you can bet everything every time. Lung swiped Sillin's card reader across the card reader he carried with him. After looking at the number on it, his eyebrows rose. It looks like you're pretty confident. Knight tossed his card over as well. Bet it all on me too. Lung. I'll transfer the money to your card later. C.I. Jincheng also said from the other side. Tonight, while the other students were either too excited to sleep or training through the night, the 4 of them conspired to make money in the dormitory. What a scumbag it was. The next day, the first match list on the Sector Championships platform had been released. The match allocation was randomly assigned by the system, And Sillin and Knight's first match was against a pair of Prometheus Academy duo from Sector B. Their IDs were World Domination and Armies Breaker. Judging from their pre-match training results, they had a winning rate of more than 90%. Moreover, both of them were A-rank genotypes. It made sense. Which contestant in the tournament didn't have some skill? Moreover, both World Domination and Armies Breaker were among the top 50 in last year's single combat tournament. After a year of hard work, they definitely weren't weak in terms of strength, at least not in Sector B. Shadow X's first match was sure to be watched by a lot of people. Even those who were competing at the same time were prepared to end their matches as soon as possible to watch. It was only the first round of matches, but the number of people watching Shadow X and Knight's match had already reached the peak of the top 8. When Shadow X's iconic generic robot appeared on the field, the audience boiled with excitement. This was the first time Shadow X had appeared on the field since he disappeared 4 days ago. However, the audience was destined to be disappointed. In the first match, Shadow X crossed his arms and stood motionless at the side the moment he entered the field. Then he watched the battle to the end. The entire match was won by Knight alone, and he didn't even use Thunderstorm Punch. He was still able to send the Prometheus duo flying in 5 minutes with ease. Of course, if he held back a little, the other party could have lasted another 5 minutes, or if Knight was a little more serious, he could have finished off the other party in 2 minutes. However, Long's bet was 5 minutes. Shadow X didn't fight in the first match, and Knight won 1 versus 2. The second match was the same. The third, the fourth, gradually, some people couldn't sit still anymore. Damn system, can't you arrange a stronger opponent for them? It's been 5 matches, and Shadow X hasn't fought even once. The few groups that were defeated by Knight wanted to cry. They were actually quite strong in the school. Finally, under everyone's expectant gazes, the duo of Shadow X and Knight welcomed a special opponent. The opponent was not from a military academy, and the reason why they were called special was because one of them played with guns, and the other played with swords. The tournament rules didn't forbid weapons, but they had to apply for it. If both sides accepted it, then there was no problem. It was obvious that Knight and Sillin didn't refuse. In fact, they were quite looking forward to it. Guns and knives? Interesting. After 5 disappointing matches, the spectating students became excited once more. It was because Shadow X was definitely going to fight in this match. They had only heard of Shadow X's strength and had never seen it with their own eyes. After all, Shadow X had only fought 3 times, and no one had recorded it. No one could imagine just how strong he was. The time of Shadow X and Knight's match was different in different sectors, different planets, or even different places on the same planet. However, being able to witness Shadow X fight with their own eyes was worth staying up all night. Chapter 58. There was a reason why so many people were optimistic about this match. First of all, the duo that Shadow X and Knight were about to face were using weapons. One used dual blades, and the other used dual pistols. Second, and also the reason that many people were excited about, was that the duo using dual blades and pistols were both women, and they were 2 famous beauties of Sector B's Billy Academy no less. Since they were 2 great beauties, the 2 men, Shadow X and Knight, would probably be more tactful towards them. Moreover, these 2 women were extremely lethal, and would definitely force Shadow X to act. In fact, some people were even guessing if Shadow X and Knight would fall in this match. After all, there was news before the match that Shadow X and Knight had agreed to their opponents using weapons, but they were still fighting with their bare hands. This pedantic gentlemanly demeanor would be their fatal weakness. This was the logic behind the saying that one would fail miserably in a simple task after crossing 1,000 flowers. The third and most important point was that this saber and spear duo, Lu Yewu and One Smile Kill, were ranked second only to the Visby brothers in the last double combat tournament. The last second place should be able to force Shadow X to act no matter what, right? It was unlikely that Knight alone would be able to hold on. There were even more people watching this match on the Sector Championships platform than the first match. The number of viewers for the matches that started at the same time as this match was pitifully low. Even if some of the duos were somewhat famous, they were completely overshadowed by the duo of Shadow X and Knight. Boss Boar, Do you think Shadow X will act in this match? In front of the microcomputer, Faradin asked Boar. Boar thought for a moment and said, if Knight still does not use his Thunderstorm Punch, then Shadow X will act. This is because both opponents are armed, and one smile kill's marksmanship is pretty good. Although it is a little inconceivable to use a gun in a double combat tournament, in reality, she will not lower her attack power just because of this. The number of people who fell to one smile kill's gun in close combat during the pre-match training is no less than 100. One smile kill's gun can be used as a blade, and when it comes to close combat, one smile kill will not lose to Liu Yewu. Although Boar was a military academy student, he had never underestimated the people of Sector B. He had done his research on the veteran experts of Sector B. It wasn't just Faradin and Boar. Kamas, Feng Haichao, Ryan, Ban, and the others were also watching this match in front of their microcomputers. They truly wanted to know just how strong Shadow X was. If they were not strong enough, they would not participate in the double combat. They would directly fight for the championship of the single combat, because they had signed up for both projects. Under everyone's gaze, the duo of One Smile Kill and Liu Yewu walked into the arena. Their beautiful faces, tight-fitting midriff-bearing shorts, and beautiful waistlines were enough to attract everyone's attention even though they were just virtual characters. However, the next moment, the two people who appeared behind them took the spotlight. It was still the same costume, still the same generic robot appearance, but it directly moved the attention of the audience in front of the microcomputer directly away from the two beauties. Shadow X, you'll make a move this time, right? As usual, Shadow X and Knight leisurely sauntered into the arena. The difference was that this time, it was Knight's turn to stand at the edge of the arena with his arms crossed as if he was watching a show, while Shadow X walked step by step to the center of the arena. The people in front of the microcomputers were instantly excited. Shadow X is going to make a move this time. He's really going to make a move this time. Boar, Faradin, and the others subconsciously straightened their bodies and stared at the generic robot on the microcomputer screen without missing a single glance. As Shadow X approached, One Smile Kill and Liu Yewu, who were standing side by side, separated. One retreated backward, and the other moved forward. One Smile Kill's slender fingers hooked the twin pistols that were originally holstered on both sides of her thighs into her hands. She nimbly twirled the pistols between her fingers. From this practiced movement, it could be seen that One Smile Kill had been playing with guns for quite some time. But in Silin's eyes, this was nothing more than playing with guns. Meanwhile, Liu Yewu also took out her twin willow blades. In this era, there were very few people who could use such ancient weapons well. Those who used such weapons were usually the inheritors of some ancient branch. Liu Yewu looked at Shadow X, who was calmly walking over at a steady pace, and suddenly felt an inexplicable sense of oppression and urgency. That expressionless white face and that excessively calm movements gave people a feeling that they couldn't see through him or see through him. If that was the case, Liu Yewu leaped into the air and unfurled her blades. The wind from the blades howled as the silvery white blades closed in on Shadow X. But very strangely, Shadow X did not seem to be afraid at all. He still carried that kind of seemingly careless movement, but his figure flashed when Liu Yewu's twin blades came slashing over. Bam! Liu Yewu was sent flying backwards towards where One Smile Kill was standing. The wind from the blades was disrupted. In that instant, just when Liu Yewu was confident that she could cut the opponent, Shadow X's instantaneous high-speed movement and an inexplicable force caused the blades to deviate from their original positions. At the same time, Shadow X's palm had already passed through the gap between the twin blades and slashed over. Liu Yewu had no choice but to raise her blades to block this attack. Although Shadow X's speed in dodging the blades was very fast, the attack he launched wasn't fast at all. However, Liu Yewu could feel the force of this palm. As expected, this force sent her flying straight away. While flying backwards, Liu Yewu was still wondering why One Smile Kill didn't shoot. It wasn't that One Smile Kill didn't want to shoot at that moment, but she couldn't find a point to shoot. Shadow X was almost completely blocked by Liu Yewu. Before this, there were many people who used similar methods to avoid One Smile Kill's gun, but they were all blown up by One Smile Kill. In that instant, One Smile Kill wanted to laugh, but she still couldn't see Shadow X's figure after she shifted her angle. Shadow X was a few steps away from Lu Yewu. As Lu Yewu retreated, he moved along with her, using Lu Yewu as a shield at all times so that One Smile Kill couldn't find an absolute killing point. If One Smile Kill fired recklessly, there was a high chance that she would hurt Lu Yewu. Lu Yewu sensed Shadow X's thoughts and slashed at the ground with one blade. She used the momentum to twist her waist and slashed at Shadow X. Even if this slash couldn't hit Shadow X, it would still force him out of that angle and allow One Smile Kill to find a point to shoot. However, impossible. Lu Yewu's eyes widened in shock as she stared at the tip of her blade caught between the opponent's two fingers. At the same time the tip of her blade was caught by the opponent, a pulling force came from the tip. Lu Yewu tightened her grip on the blade to prevent the opponent from pulling it away. In the next moment, a huge tremor traveled through the blade to the space between her thumb and forefinger. Her entire wrist felt like it was about to break. Lu Yewu felt her wrists go numb, and her blades left her body. Crack! A sound came from the gun in One Smile Kill's hand. However, it wasn't the sound of a bullet being fired. What followed was silence. Two blades. One pointed at Lu Yewu's forehead, and the other at One Smile Kill's neck artery. Chapter 59. Fast Too Fast. Only a short 5 seconds had passed since Lu Yewu had launched her attack until now. 5 seconds. Some people yawned, and when they opened their eyes again, this was the situation. Before they could understand anything, before they could reflect on anything, it had already become like this. Lu Yewu's hands were still numb from being pointed between her eyebrows. She did not understand how Shadow X did it, or rather, she somewhat understood but was unwilling to believe it. Clamping the tip of a blade with 2 fingers? Was it really that easy to clamp? Such a situation had never happened even in the double combat tournament last year. She had to admit that Shadow X was very strong. A blade is a lethal weapon. If you can't activate its murderous aura, it's no different from a soft wooden stick in front of an expert. This was what her father once told her. Was this the situation he was talking about? Click, 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 pack. One Smile Kill pulled the trigger repeatedly in disbelief. Then, the gun in her hand disintegrated and fell to the ground piece by piece. Not a single bullet was missing from the clip. Sillin pressed the tip of his blade closer. One Smile Kill was still far from it. Aflan's bodyguard knew that there was something wrong with his gun even without firing a shot. That was something that could only be detected by those who had played with guns to a certain degree. They would be able to detect even the tiniest of changes, unlike One Smile Kill who kept pulling the trigger in disbelief. This was the difference between realms. Hesitation, uncertainty, lack of ruthlessness, lack of killing intent when drawing the blade, lack of decisiveness when drawing the gun. This was a student's weakness. As the tip of the knife approached, One Smile Kill, who had only felt a chill before, could now feel blood flowing down the tip of the knife. Although it was only a virtual platform, the inertia and the pain transmitted by the sensors made her feel like she was bleeding. Lu Yewu and One Smile Kill could clearly feel the killing intent coming from the tip of the blade. If they did not admit defeat now, then this generic robot in front of them would really make them bleed in the arena. That would make them look even worse. Less than a minute had passed since the start of the match. One of them had lost both of her blades, and the other had not fired a single shot. Although they were very unwilling, the reality was right there. One Smile Kill and Lu Yewu admit defeat. The winner of this match is Knight and Shadow X. Many people were silent when they saw the words that popped up on the screen. To be exact, they had yet to react. Bull withdrew his gaze and sat in his chair, deep in thought. Shadow X had purposely pushed Lu Yewu back, or else he wouldn't have been so slow. However, what Bohr didn't understand was that Shadow X clearly could have killed Lu Yewu in one hit. As long as that palm strike was just a little bit faster, Lu Yewu wouldn't have had the time to react and block the attack, and Lu Yewu would have basically lost all of her combat strength once the attack landed. Moreover, since he could easily dodge Lu Yewu's saber shadows and find the gaps between them, he could also dodge One Smile Kill's spear. The speed of Lu Yewu's saber was very fast. Ordinary people would not even be able to distinguish the real shadow in the saber shadow. Since Shadow X was able to dodge Lu Yewu's twin blades and attack through the gaps between them, Boy absolutely refused to believe that he couldn't dodge One Smile Kill's gun with that kind of speed and ease. In truth, a lot of people did not understand why Shadow X would use such a method to win this match. This method was a little cheap, a little despicable, and it even took advantage of the system's loopholes. Why did it take advantage of the system's loopholes? Shadow X's current generic robot body was relatively thin and not very tall. This way, it was very advantageous for him to hide beside Lu Yewu and avoid One Smile Kill's attack points. If it was his main body, perhaps One Smile Kill would still be able to find the attack points. There were also people who posted on the Sector Championship forums, accusing Shadow X of being too despicable and cruel. Not only did he win through tricks, he even used such a method to humiliate the two beauties. Both their blades were snatched away, not a single shot was fired, and their own blades were even pointed at their own glabella and neck. How could One Smile Kill and Lu Yewu endure this? When they saw this post, Kamas and Feng Haichao only smiled mockingly. If Shadow X really didn't hold back, how could One Smile Kill and Lu Yewu only be like this? Everything else aside, just the blade that was pointed at Lu Yewu alone. That blade could have directly slashed down from above. However, Shadow X obviously left the other party some face. He retracted his blade a little and merely pointed it at Lu Yewu's glabella. If it was night, he wouldn't care if you were a man or a woman or who you were. He would have sliced you in half with a single slash. What do you think? Kamas, who was in front of the microcomputer, asked Feng Haichao. Feng Haichao twirled his hat and said, "He's just playing. He's just playing. It's not just Shadow X, it's the same for Night. Up until now, Night has yet to use Thunderstorm Fist. No one knows to what extent Night's Thunderstorm Fist has been trained. Night's strength is indeed hard to estimate if Ji Feihong thinks so highly of him." "Yu Lu, what do you think?" Kamas looked at Yu Lu, who had been sitting there and playing with his gun. Yu Lu did not participate in the duel. In fact, he did not even register his account on the Sector Championship platform for the past 3 years since he entered the military academy. However, Yu Lu was someone that even Kamas and Feng Haichao admired greatly. The first military academy's sharpshooter Yu Lu's name resounded throughout the entire Sector C. The reason why Yu Lu had never been interested in the Sector Championship was because there was no shooting competition on the Sector Championship platform. Yu Lu's head was lowered and his eyes were drooping. He looked like he was asleep, but his hands were not slow at all. When a handgun was tossed into the air, it was in parts, but when it landed back on the ground, it was perfectly assembled. Moreover, Yu Lu was only playing with the gun with one hand. His finger movements were so fast that even Kamas had to admit his inferiority. Yu Lu's other hand was supporting his chin, giving off an impression of laziness, as if he would sleep whenever he was tired. However, those who knew Yu Lu knew not to provoke him even when he was asleep. Many people had seen Yu Lu playing with his gun like this even when he was asleep, and when a soccer ball was kicked at him, he instinctively shot it and exploded it. Hearing Kamas' question, Yu Lu spent a great deal of effort to open his eyelids and look at Kamas. What did you say?" He had only heard it as a question just now. Kamas and Feng Haichao. As expected, this fellow fell asleep again. Feng Haichao rubbed his forehead helplessly. "Kamas is asking about your opinion of the match just now." "Opinion?" Yu Lu scratched his face with the hand supporting his chin. "Shadow X is very strong. It's really not easy to make you say the words very strong." "What else?" Feng Haichao asked again. Yu Lu yawned and stretched. "I only watched Shadow X, meaning that he did not look at the others at all." As expected, the other 3 people in the arena were ignored again? Sigh. Why was it again? Yu Lu stood up from his chair. With a flick of his fingers, the gun that was still parts just now fell into his hand. He skillfully stuffed the gun into his wide trouser pocket. Every time they saw Yu Lu put the gun into his wide trouser pocket, Kamas and Feng Haichao's eyes would twitch uncontrollably. "Bro, aren't you afraid of misfiring? That's very close to his crotch." Yu Lu stretched his arms for a bit and let out another big yawn. Then he lazily walked to the microcomputer and pulled up the battle footage he recorded just now. He slowed down one of the clips and pointed at one of Shadow X's movements. He's the second person I've seen in my age group who can use a gun like that. Feng Haichao and Kamas moved closer. It was the scene of Shadow X snatching Lu Yewu's twin blades and pointing them at Lu Yewu and One Smile Kill. When Shadow X pointed his blade at One Smile Kill, there was a moment when his hand brushed past One Smile Kill's gun. After that moment, One Smile Kill pulled the trigger, but no bullets were fired. At the same time, Shadow X's blade was placed beside her carotid artery. Chapter 60. No matter how the others discussed the match, Sillin and the others did not care. As usual, they continued to do their own things after the match was over. The moment the match was over, Lung immediately called Sillin and Knight's communicator. Judging from his high-pitched voice and 2 eyebrows that were about to fly off, he must have gained a lot this time. The truth was as such. Lung was so happy that his mouth was cramping. The odds of the previous few bets weren't high, and he didn't earn much money. But this time, Lung bet that Shadow X would win in 1 minute, and the opponent wouldn't fire a single shot. The odds were very high, and Lung bet all 4 of their money on it. After the match was over, Lung's mouth couldn't close even once when he saw the amount on his card. This was also why Sillin chose to win in such a way. After the match was over, the Sector Championship forum was filled with posts related to the match. The news of Pride winning the mech battle and entering the quarterfinals was directly trampled down to the ground. There were praises and criticisms. But there was one point that resonated with everyone, and that was, the match ended too quickly. It was less than a minute from the start of the system's announcement to the end of the match, and within this 1 minute, both sides had actually fought for less than 5 seconds. What kind of concept was 5 seconds? Some people just turned their heads away and chatted for a bit, and when the screen cut back to them, they discovered that the match was over. I shouldn't have. There was a deep depression that felt like the match was over the second they closed their eyes and opened them again. Although they could watch a recording, watching a live broadcast and a recorded broadcast were 2 completely different moods. They had completely lost that kind of nervous and excited feeling. Therefore, after this match, everyone came to a conclusion, and that was to never slip away when watching Shadow X's gladiator fights in the future. Even a second could mean missing out on an exciting killing blow. Following Shadow X's performance in this match, some analytics-loving people began to analyze Shadow X's strength and his personality in real life from many aspects. But they still couldn't come up with a conclusion. There was just too little information about Shadow X. It was because of this that some people began to offer a high bounty for the truth about Shadow X. The moment this bounty was announced, the people of Seven Lights were in an uproar. In reality, before the other people of Seven Lights were officially in an uproar, less than 2 seconds after the bounty was announced, Sillin's communicator rang. "Sillin, don't ruin your future for a little bit of money." As soon as he connected, he heard Lung howling at the top of his lungs. Sillin pulled the communicator away a little and looked at the 7-digit bounty on the forum. "You call this a little bit of money?" Without waiting for Sillin to say anything, Lung's lips moved nonstop, carrying out a long-term analysis and macroscopic explanation to Sillin. In conclusion, if he were to reveal his identity now, it would be disadvantageous to the bet. Sillin picked his ear. "Got it. I'm not planning to stand out right now." "That's good." Lung heaved a sigh of relief. "I'll go and study the situation of the next bet. You can continue working." Beep. Sillin looked at the disconnected communicator and curled his lips. "This bastard." He put the communicator aside and began to assemble the parts on the desk. Sillin had modified the study a little, turning it into a dual-use study and workshop. He had to fight in the Sector Championship, but he also had to complete the mission that Sir Mo had assigned to him. Otherwise, with Sir Mo's awkward temperament, he would definitely feel that he was being neglected. If that happened, then Sillin could forget about participating in the Sector Championship. While he was assembling the parts, the dormitory's doorbell rang. Normally speaking, the doorbell of Sillin's dormitory would never ring. There had been no visitors until now. Even if there were, they would bring them in personally. For example, Surd and Hard. After that mission, Knight had brought them to the dormitory for a drink. As for pride, unless you personally invite him, that fellow will not deign to pay you a visit. After the doorbell rang a few times, Knight turned on the dormitory's intercom and said from upstairs, "Sillin, I'm about to challenge that brat Pride to a mech fight right now." Knight meant that he was busy and did not have the heart to open the door. The more subtle meaning was that if you are busy too, please ignore it. Sillin did not stop what he was doing immediately. He had the security system turn on the screen to show who the visitor was. When Sillin saw the person on the screen, he smiled slightly. "He's here so soon. That's fine too. Saves you guys the trouble of guessing blindly." The people of Seven Lights had always been extremely curious about Shadow X's identity. To think that such an expert was hiding in their school. The bounty aside, right now Shadow X was the most mysterious and highly watched person on the Sector Championship platform. If they could find out Shadow X's true identity and reveal it himself, then their fame would rise greatly as well. To find out Shadow X's true identity and hack into the Sector Championship platform's system? Unlikely. The Sector Championship platform's system was jointly built by the professionals of Sector B and Sector C. Its defenses were incredibly strong. If hacking didn't work, then what about connections? Some people who relied on their good background tried to establish a connection with the Sector Championship platform's maintainers, but they could not come to a conclusion. Although the Sector Championship platform's maintainers could not publicly reveal a student's information, they could still investigate it. However, they discovered that Shadow X's information was protected by many layers of additional protection, and those complicated procedures were very difficult to decode. Since neither of these two methods worked, then the most direct way was to look for Knight. Moreover, Knight was the kind of person who dared to flip a table and pull out a gun even in front of Seven Lights' headmaster. Moreover, he had a very deep military background. Everyone knew this, so even though they were very curious about Shadow X's identity, not many people dared to ask Knight directly. Although they dared not provoke Knight, there was one thing that many people knew, and that was the four most awesome people in Seven Lights' dormitory. Beating around the bush should work, right? No one dared to provoke Knight, and C.I. Jincheng was not on planet Seven Lights. Ask Andryra Lung? No, they would be fooled until they couldn't even tell their feet from their head. If that was the case, then they could only look for Duance Sillin. The first person to inquire about Shadow X was none other than Alan, his family's electronic magazine owner. Alan had already guessed Shadow X's identity from the moment Shadow X entered the Sector Championship platform's top 3 in just 3 days, but he never came to a conclusion. Later, when Shadow X teamed up with Knight to participate in the double combat tournament, Alan once again began to suspect the possibility of Sillin being Shadow X. Sillin led Alan through the door, but did not let Alan sit in the living room. Instead, he brought him to his own study. "Sillin, the Boston ivy outside your dormitory is growing really well. It's just as the rumors say." Alan chose a starting topic. "It's just a coincidence." Sillin passed a cup to Alan. "There are fruit juice, milk, beer, tea, and so on in the water dispenser. Pour whatever you want, don't be shy." Alan looked at Sillin's study while he was collecting the fruit juice from the water dispenser. There weren't a lot of books, and parts were piled on the table. The other places in the study were also filled with sorted parts. Seeing that Sillin had sat down beside the table and was assembling the parts again, Alan felt a little embarrassed, as if he had disturbed Sillin's work. "I'm sorry to have disturbed you. It's fine. I can talk when I'm assembling parts." Sillin turned his head and said to Alan. His hands were still moving quickly, proving that he was not lying. Alan admired Sillin. He knew who Sillin's current instructor was, and he must have genuine talent to be able to follow Professor Mo. However, when he saw Sillin assembling the parts with his own eyes, Alan had a different feeling. He truly felt as if he was looking at an elegant piece of art. Sillin's hands were moving very quickly and precisely. The parts could be seen jumping between his fingers, and he was assembling them in the next moment. As he watched, Alan began to get lost in thought, as if he had been sucked into the whirlpool formed by Sillin's fast hands and those parts. Although he was still watching Sillin's hands assembling the parts, Alan's eyes had already begun to lose focus. Alan would never have thought that he would be unknowingly hypnotized just by watching Silen's assembling movements. Chapter 61. Silen shook his arms and looked very tired. I finally assembled another one. Oh right, Alan, are you hungry? Although Alan was completely hypnotized right now, and Silen could completely understand the opinions and speculations of the other people in Seven Lights about Shadow X from Alan's mouth, Silen did not ask Alan anything about Shadow X. For a person like Alan, talking about those things might cause Alan's subconscious to rebound, and it would appear that Silen was hiding something. The crowd continued to struggle over Shadow X's true identity, but the sector championship was still going on. Knight was the only one who fought in the last two matches, but he was forced to use Thunderstorm Punch at the very last moment of one of the matches. Although it was just a fist shadow with lightning and he did not use Thunderstorm Punch in its entirety, it was enough to excite some of the students. Tisich, Knight's face was full of disdain. You may look like a decent kid, but you're actually very evil and full of evil ideas. Those people who were tricked by you are still laughing and counting their money for you. When he was assembling in front of Alan, Silen's hand speed couldn't be considered fast. It was much slower than when he was assembling in front of Mo Heng. The reason he slowed down was so that Alan's eyes could keep up with his hand speed. Crick! Alan carefully looked at the stony-faced knight. As expected, he was terrifying. No wonder those people did not dare to ask him directly. Ahem. I'm sorry to disturb you. I'm here to look for Silen. Silen's voice turned deep as he said unhurriedly, these parts must be assembled today. This is the mission my instructor gave me. There are a lot of parts, aren't there? Silen, there's no need to trouble yourself. I'll leave after a chat. In reality, what Silen said to Alan was not false. It could only be said that it was a little one-sided. Alan woke up to the sound, and he saw a fully assembled machine on the table in front of his eyes. Silen had moved it into a big box, and there were already a few similar machines inside the box wrapped in shockproof bags. Looking at the date written on the shockproof bags, Alan blushed with shame. It looked like Silen was really busy from day to night. Although he was a little absent-minded, Alan remembered what Silen had said to him and how he had answered. Looking at those spare parts and the assembled machinery in the study again, Alan felt that he was worrying too much. There was no way Silen was Shadow X. Didn't he see how busy he was? He had only mentioned that Professor Mo did not wish for him to participate in the sector championship, but he had not mentioned whether he would participate or not. As for the fact that he didn't see Knight often but was very familiar with him, well, it was true. Before the sector championship, aside from that mission, most of the time they kept in touch through the communicator. Even during the few days of the sector championship, Knight would return to his study right after the tournament to start working on the mission Mo Heng had given him. They would only see each other for less than an hour every day. The further they went, the stronger the opponents they would meet. Although the system assigned them randomly, some of the veteran powerhouses and teams with high win rates would still be separated, so that they would not meet each other too early. However, with the appearance of the top 32, the flames of war in the sector championship were officially ignited. This was because after the top 32 had been decided, the fighters would draw their own lots. It was possible that the first match would be an extremely strong fight against an extremely strong one. After staring at the jerky in Alan's hand for a moment, Knight wandered into the kitchen to get some food. He was obviously hungry after challenging Pride's fighter. However, when he saw Alan sitting in the living room, Knight's face immediately darkened. What's going on? Let's go to the living room. As he spoke, Silen opened the storage cabinet in the study, only to find a small bag of red bean buns lying all alone inside. You want to ask about Shadow X, don't you? Silen interrupted Alan's words. I can't say anything about Shadow X. I've promised them. The human brain was a very peculiar thing. Humans only had a small understanding of the brain. Even when the other party was hypnotized, one should not be presumptuous enough to think that one had complete control over the other party's thoughts. Different people had different ways of dealing with it. This was what Genya had told Silen when he was teaching Silen about hypnosis. I gave him the jerky in his hand, he didn't take it himself. There are still a lot of them in the storage cabinet. Don't be so stingy. Silen said calmly. Yeah, there are a lot of parts. I spend most of my time assembling these parts every day. I don't have much time to do anything else. Silin's hand movements were still the same as before. My mentor Professor Mo doesn't like me to participate in the sector championship. It was only when Alan looked at the time again that he realized that more than 2 hours had actually passed. When he thought back, the only thing he could remember was Silin assembling the parts. He actually stared at Silin assembling for 2 hours straight. That was why Silin had only used a curvilinear method and told Alan some seemingly irrelevant things. He wanted Alan to deduce the conclusion that Silin could not possibly be Shadow X from these things. Alan's hand trembled when he saw Knight. He could feel the anger emanating from Knight's body. Could it be that Knight did not like visitors? Alan let out 2 dry laughs. It's mainly because we were too curious. We didn't even know that there was such an awesome person in Seven Lights. Due to Silin's deliberate misdirection, Alan had indeed excluded Silin from the scope of his suspicion. It looked like Silin was in a difficult position, so the people of Seven Lights had shifted their target. Then, when Alan placed his attention on the movements of Silin's hands, Silin's assembling movements began to change slowly. Without Alan noticing in the slightest, Alan's hand speed changed in a regular pattern. Matching this rhythm, the specific jumping of the parts and the trajectory of his hand shadows, Alan's consciousness was slowly drawn into a whirlpool. Alan nodded, but his eyes were still unfocused as if he was in a half-asleep, half-awake trance state. Thanks. Alan accepted the jerky and water cup from Silin. He paused for a moment before asking, "Have you logged onto the Sector Championship platform before, Silin?" 20 of the top 32 groups were from Sector C, 3 were from the 10 trade sectors, and 9 were from Sector B. The opponent Silin and Knight encountered in the top 16 out of the top 32 was a group from the 10 trade sectors. It was also the group with the best record out of the 3 trade sectors groups. Just like Silin's group, they maintained a perfect record. Thank you for the compliment. That bastard aura of yours was too strong. I couldn't stand it, so I ran away immediately. Alan. Is this the point? I knew I was overthinking things. A person as big as him can't even compare to a bag of jerky. While they were talking, Knight came bouncing down from upstairs while humming a little tune. It looked like he had won the fight against Pride. Knight did not see Alan's figure when he came out. He left so soon? Silin said that he promised them and not him. This further convinced Alan that Silin was not Shadow X. That them should be referring to Knight and Shadow X. Silin threw a bag at him. What do you mean by what? Do I look that bad to you? Silin took out 2 bags of jerky from the kitchen storage cabinet and handed one to Alan. Don't give me that. When did you become so bashful? This jerky is not bad. Try it. You're overthinking. I'm just impressed by my extraordinary logical reasoning ability. What did you do to that kid? Knight sat on the sofa and swung his legs while chewing on the jerky and asked. I'll let you in on a secret. Although Shadow X and Knight are very familiar with each other, they don't meet often. While Knight went to the kitchen, Alan immediately stood up and excused himself. He felt prickles all over his body the moment he saw Knight. Knight's aura was too strong. Chapter 62. The team that Silin and Knight were about to face was a little special. They came from the 10 trade sectors, and those who could stand out in the 10 trade sectors were definitely not inferior to some of the people from the military academies. Another special characteristic was that there was a non-average human in this team. His ID was Octopus, an octopus. His name was the same as his own, but he had 2 more pairs of hands than the average human. Furthermore, the octopus were more robust, belonging to the category of strength and speed. His performance in the previous matches had been very eye-catching. But Silin's attention was on the other person in this team. ID Koi behind the smile. Although he had attacked many times in the previous matches, his performance was far less eye-catching than Octopus. Silin had a feeling from watching the recordings of the previous matches that this person was definitely not inferior to Octopus. He was also a rather low-key person. This feeling of Silin's was confirmed during the Sector Championship platform tournament. Koi behind the smile and Octopus entered the arena before Silin and Knight. Octopus was moving his body. His 6 arms were very eye-catching, and Sillin noticed that his 6 arms had a wide range of movement and were very agile. It would be a little troublesome to find an attack point from behind. Unlike Octopus, Koi behind the smile stood there quietly. When he saw Sillin and Knight enter the arena, Koi behind the smile raised his hand in a greeting gesture. However, after seeing Koi behind the smile's gesture, Sillin narrowed his eyes. When Koi behind the smile raised his arm, his fingers moved slightly. The others would not notice. Forget about whether they could capture that momentary movement. Who would notice the minute movements of a person's fingers when he raised his hand in greeting before the match had even begun? But Sillin's habits prevented him from overlooking every minute movement of his opponent, especially the fingers. Never ignore a hunter's finger. Even if they only had one finger, they could easily kill someone without being noticed. Koi behind the smile's finger movement was the secret code of the 6th team of Vanguard. So, Sillin made a hello gesture. Similarly, when he raised his hand, his fingers also moved rapidly. Koi behind the smile was momentarily surprised. Not bad, he figured it out so quickly. Originally, he did not expect Sillin to be able to see the hidden meaning behind that gesture. As expected of someone that the captain thought highly of. You deal with 8 arms, I'll deal with the other one, Sillin said to Knight. Knight raised an eyebrow. This wasn't how the previous arrangement was supposed to be, but since Sillin said so, Knight didn't object. He wondered how Lung's reaction would be after the match ended. After both sides were ready, the system displayed a countdown of 10 seconds. During these 10 seconds, while Coquettish Smile was stretching his arms, Shadow X was also stretching his limbs. While the two of them seemed to be warming up for the match, they had already communicated with each other more than 10 times. Their fingers moved very quickly, and in an instant, they had completed hundreds of secret codes. Eyesight, mental arithmetic, and reflexes were all conditions that had to be met. If any of them could not keep up, there would be a gap in communication. Capturing the hundreds of codes made by the other party in an instant, then converting these codes into information, processing the information, and then responding to the other party. This was a test of a person's ability. However, after the match officially began, the two of them stopped communicating with each other. After all, the surveillance on the Sector Championships platform would be a lot stricter when the match officially began, and they would officially record the match. As for those warm-up activities before the match, they wouldn't be recorded. This was also why Coquettish Smile chose to communicate with Sillin at that time. Knight immediately rushed up and fought 8 arms. There weren't many octopus in the army, and it was very rare to see one. But since he was able to meet an octopus here, Knight couldn't let go of this great opportunity. This was a new attempt. Knight was very excited as he fought, and 8 arms was obviously about the same. The more they fought, the more excited they became, and the faster they fought. 8 arms certainly had the strength. When lightning appeared in Knight's fists, 8 arms still seemed to be holding back. Compared to Knight and 8 claws, Shadow X and Coquettish Smile's side were also fighting very quickly and fiercely, but they didn't look as flashy as Knight's Thunderstorm Punch, nor did they look as special as 8 Claw's 6 arms. Coquettish Smile and Shadow X's fight couldn't be said to be boring. Every move they made could be used as a teaching demonstration, but Boar and the others just felt that it was very strange and awkward. It wasn't Shadow X's style in their imagination. 8 Arms' performance gradually faltered under Knight's fierce offensive. After being pushed back by Knight's punch, 8 Arms and Coquettish Smile chose to surrender. Knight obviously felt that the fight wasn't over yet, and he was very dissatisfied when he heard the system's voice announcing the end of the match. He felt that 8 Arms could still hold on, and shouldn't be at this level. During the clash with 8 Arms, he felt the endurance of 8 Arms' muscles. Although Knight was confident that he could win against 8 Arms if the fight continued, Knight was a little dissatisfied that 8 Arms surrendered just like that. To put it bluntly, he hadn't fought enough. Although the match looked very exciting and dazzling, he felt that something was missing. Something's wrong. In front of the microcomputer, Kamas said with a frown. Feng Haichao nodded. It feels a little flashy but impractical. Although both sides fought with great vigor and intensity, it's not what we wanted to see. Maybe our expectations are too high. Regardless of how this match was received, Coquettish Smile and 8 Arms had completed their mission. Both of them were members of Vanguard Division 6, and because they met the age requirement, they were sent to the academy by Schotten to study. Normally, hunters wouldn't participate in these matches, but this time, Schotten had the two of them bring a message to Sillin. A very important message. Assassination, Level 1 alert. Assassination, Level 1 alert. This was what Coquettish Smile wanted to convey to Sillin. As for what rank they got, whether they won or lost, they didn't care. They weren't interested either. After the match ended, Sillin immediately received a complaint from Lung. Due to the last-minute change in battle plan, Lung had earned a lot less money this time. However, Lung didn't ask Sillin's reasons for doing so, and continued to analyze the next match. Knight didn't feel satisfied after the match, so he went to the fighter jet training field to pick out fighter jets with some people from the military academy. Many of these people were Knight's former classmates, and after watching the match, they would gather again to pick out fighter jets and armor. This was something they used to do when they were still in the intermediate education school, but now that they were in the advanced education school, they had much less free time. Now that they finally had the sector championships platform, they definitely had to make the most of their time. However, Knight never revealed Shadow X's true identity, and because of this, he was even surrounded and killed by a few of his friends at the fighter jet training field. Knight, I'm going out for a walk, and I'll drop by the supermarket on the way. There's no stock in the cabinet. Do you want me to bring anything? Asked Sillin as he pushed open the door. Just bring me an extra portion of whatever you want to buy. Buy more jerky. Knight roared without turning his head. He was now fighting hard with a few friends from the military academy at the fighter jet training field, and he had to get his revenge for the ambush from the last time. Sillin walked out of the dormitory. He suddenly felt a little stuffy today, so he came out for a walk and a breath of fresh air. That was why he didn't use the delivery method. Right now it was nighttime, and there weren't many people around, but the supermarket was open day and night. However, Sillin hadn't taken a few steps when his communicator rang. There was no image, only an encrypted message, a line of words and a picture. The picture indicated a certain place in the forest between Seven Lights Business District and Entertainment District, Sleepless City. Teresa is in our hands. You have 1 hour. Chapter 63. The message disappeared automatically after it was displayed, and the signal could not be traced. It seemed that this group had made ample preparations. An hour. The other party did not give Sillin any extra time to prepare at all. Moreover, it was 3 days earlier than Coquettish Smile said. Sillin returned to the accommodation, took out the modified hoverboard and left a message on the message machine. If he could not return by then, the message machine would tell Knight what to do. Sillin did not bring his communicator. It was too easily exposed. After the modification, the hoverboard was installed with a silencer drive, and its energy system was improved as well. Sillin stepped on the hoverboard and flashed into the night, flying towards the location marked on the map. At a certain academy dormitory in Sector D of the 10 trade sectors, Coquettish Smile sat inelegantly on a chair and was talking to his communicator. I've already passed the message over. He should know what to do. The Coquettish Smile and 8 Tentacles had joined the sector championship purely for fun. Although most hunters did not participate in that kind of competition, 8 Tentacles and Coquettish Smile were just too bored. Moreover, the incident with Shadow X before the start of the sector championship had piqued their curiosity, which was why they had signed up. They did not expect to receive a mission to deliver a secret code, and even more surprisingly, the legendary Shadow X was actually their teammate. Coquettish Smile and 8 Tentacles had never planned to perform too well on the sector championship platform. They were just too lucky that the opponents they encountered were not strong, and even the military academy students were not strong. That was why they were able to enter the top 32. Even without the mission to pass a secret code, the duo did not plan to continue fighting. Exposing their true strength in front of everyone was not a hunter's way of doing things. As for how far Sillin was going to fight, the duo had no interest in knowing. They did not know what the other said, but Coquettish Smile sat up with a frown. Didn't you say it's 3 days later? All right, I'll pay attention to his situation on the sector championship platform. If he doesn't show up by tomorrow, then, alright, got it. What's wrong? 8 tentacles looked at Coquettish Smile, who had been sitting there motionlessly since the call ended. Coquettish Smile sighed. Something happened to the sugar daddy, and the assassination was brought forward. I don't know the specifics, and the spies the captain arranged in 7 Lights could not contact Sillin either. Based on those people's habits, if he doesn't show up for tomorrow's round of 16 advancement, it stands to reason that he won't show up again. If he appears, it would mean that the Black Thorn Assassin organization has completely disappeared from the assassin ranking. Yes, but what are the chances of that happening? He smiled coquettishly without saying a word. Sillin arrived at the edge of the forest between the business district and the entertainment city. After arriving at the edge of the forest, he put away the hoverboard, put his coat and hoverboard into the ring, and rushed into the dense forest. In the depths of the dense forest, 3 people dressed in black were whispering something. Next to them, Teresa was lying there with her hands and feet tied up. Her hair was a little messy, and her body was covered in dust and grass, but her eyes still looked very energetic. She had only suffered some superficial wounds, and everything else was fine. Before they met Sillin, the people of Blackthorn wouldn't kill Teresa just yet. Teresa also knew that it was best for her to be obedient given her current situation. If she were to be discovered with any little tricks, these people would kill her without hesitation. She didn't think that the Duance family would contact the Black Thorn that was almost at the end of its rope. Last time, they failed in their mission to assassinate Sillin, were oppressed by many parties, and were encircled by their peers. Their remaining combat strength was no longer enough for the Black Thorn to remain on the assassin ranking. But when they were almost completely annihilated, Aflon's competitors in the family gave them a helping hand. Although she didn't know the details, Teresa could guess that this matter must have been a deal between the Duance family and the Black Thorn. Without their interference, there was no way that the Black Thorn alone could sneak into Planet 7 Lights so easily. "Brown Thorn, how is it?" one of them asked. Teresa looked up, but she couldn't see the person's face clearly in the darkness of the night. The person was walking very quickly, but Teresa didn't hear any footsteps at all. It was as if a ghost had floated over. Brown Thorn glanced at Teresa, who was lying obediently on the ground without any little tricks before turning back to his companions. "That guy has arrived, but according to Eagle Thorn, that guy disappeared after he landed on a hoverboard." "Disappeared? I can't find him. I can't even detect the hoverboard. It's as if this person never appeared." But Eagle Thorn definitely saw that guy come into the forest on a hoverboard just a moment ago. Brown Thorn was very puzzled as well. Tiger Thorn, the person who spoke just now, smiled savagely. "This young master does have some skill. Otherwise, Soft Thorn and the others wouldn't have failed." The Soft Thorn Tiger Thorn was talking about was the woman who pretended to be a nurse during the biochemical base mission. "What do we do now?" Brown Thorn asked. "Tell Eagle Thorn and the others to pay attention and not fail miserably. Otherwise, they will learn from Soft Thorn's mistakes. This is our last chance." At the end of his sentence, Tiger Thorn's voice was already filled with dense killing intent. Black Thorn's leader was being watched too closely by all parties, so he didn't come to Planet 7 Lights with them. Tiger Thorn was in charge of the operation this time, and Brown Thorn was assisting him. Although it had been a while since night had fallen over at the school zone and the dormitory zone, night had only just fallen over this part of the forest. After bursting into the forest, Sillin was not in a hurry to find his target. Instead, he silently passed through the forest in search of something. Sillin found what he was looking for at a big tree with lush branches and leaves. There was a hole in the tree trunk, and some little things would fly around the hole from time to time. They were a kind of flying ant different from termites. They were the original inhabitants of Planet 7 Lights, and their bodies were only a few millimeters long. The largest ones were no bigger than a centimeter, and their adult form had wings that were slightly longer than their bodies. Their wings would not fall off either, and they also had well-developed upper jaws. They didn't like light, and they had a wide diet. They were exactly what Sillin was looking for. He sprayed a kind of odorless potion inside and around the hole. When it came into contact with these flying ants, the potion formed a thin crystalline membrane on the surface of their bodies. Then, it slowly turned from a solid state to a gaseous state as time passed. This sublimated gas had no effect on the flying ants, but it was different for the human body. After the human body inhaled this gas, they would exhale another kind of gas that excited these little fellows, just like how a human body inhales oxygen and exhales carbon dioxide. The human body wouldn't feel any discomfort, but they would unwittingly become these little fellows' target. Other than the flying ant nest inside the tree hole, Scyllin had found a few other ant nests and treated them in the same way. This was the edge of the forest, and the little fellows would fly deeper into the forest in search of food at night. Moreover, the night wind would carry their scent even further into the forest. Right now, it was just nightfall in the forest, and the little fellows still had plenty of time to move around. On the first day Scyllin arrived at 7 Lights, he had paid special attention to these flying ants when he was inspecting the terrain. The forest was the best place to settle a grudge in secret, and it was also the easiest place to avoid satellite surveillance. There were a lot of flying ants in this forest, and Scyllin had analyzed them a long time ago and designed this potion based on their physiological parameters. Even Emoheng didn't know that Scyllin had assembled his own medicine synthesizer. If he knew, he would definitely be so happy that he would run out and show it off. This was because a medicine synthesizer required a higher level of precision, and it normally required at least 3 people to assemble it. In reality, this was not the only medicine that Scyllin had synthesized. He would only use it when he was free or when he was in a hurry. He would never fight a battle unprepared. Scyllin had stored all of these synthesized medicines inside Genya's leaf-patterned ring. Scyllin didn't know how many people were hiding in this forest, but judging from the information he obtained from Koi behind the smile, there were definitely no less than 10. These people were cold, decisive, and most importantly, they hid very well. Infrared detectors could not detect them. Without external support, Scyllin would be in a very difficult situation. One careless mistake and he would lose his life. However, most of the time, the ones who could help us were not necessarily people. Scyllin watched the little fellows fly into the distance before he slipped into the forest in a flash. The hunt had begun. Chapter 64. The medicine would not take effect so quickly. After all, this forest was huge. Perhaps many flying ants would not touch those people at all, but a single one of them would cause a chain reaction. Without other backup, Scyllin had to complete the preliminary preparations in order to obtain victory in this hunt. Along the way, Scyllin would spray the medicine whenever he came across a nest of flying ants, allowing the flying ants to carry the medicine crystals into the depths of the forest and increase his chances of success. Scyllin was not in a hurry. Blackthorn's men did not tell him why they wanted him to come within an hour, so he was patiently making preparations. From the moment he received the message to the moment he snuck into the forest, Scyllin took less than 50 minutes in total. It was twice as fast as 7 Lights' direct flying car. The place marked on the map was the depths of the forest, and there was no way they could reach there in 10 minutes. Moreover, the other party's goal was obviously not here. The reason they told Scyllin an hour was so that Scyllin would not have the time to look for help. As long as they could see Scylin's figure within an hour, those people would not care about Teresa. After all, Scyllin was their biggest target. They did not have any way to contact him. They knew that Scyllin had reached the forest, but they did not show up to explain, negotiate, or communicate with him. They only had one goal, and that was to kill Scyllin. The other places in 7 Lights were closely monitored by the security squads, so this was the best place to settle things. Time passed slowly, but Eagle Thorn did not discover any trace of Scyllin at all. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. After discovering no abnormalities in the surroundings, Eagle Thorn was about to contact his companions when he raised his hand and discovered that there were a few flying ants on his arm. He shook them off with a light shake, but this was just the beginning. One after another, flying ants flew towards him. His arm, his pants, his back, his mask. Flying ants began to fall everywhere. Due to the hasty operation this time, Eagle Thorn did not know this forest well. He thought that he might have accidentally run into a nest of flying ants, so he retreated dozens of meters back. But the situation did not improve. The number of flying ants landing on his mask grew, and it seriously interfered with Eagle Thorn's vision. Just as he was about to wipe it off, Eagle Sting suddenly felt a sense of danger. This was an instinct that had been cultivated from many years of experience. Eagle Thorn quickly jumped away from where he was and dodged a few times. However, the angles of the needles flying toward him were too tricky, and they were not in a straight line. They were very fast, and Eagle Thorn managed to dodge the first few needles. However, one of the needles still managed to pierce through his arm and cut through his skin, leaving 2 holes in his camouflage suit. It was a kind of needle with 3 sharp points protruding from 3 sides. However, when these needles pierced into tree trunks or hit rocks, they would shatter, then slowly melt and disappear. As Eagle Thorn moved swiftly, he took out some medicine and sprayed it on the wound. The medicine quickly formed a layer of membrane around the wound, sealing it and preventing blood from flowing out. It also kept the wound under control so that even if the needle was poisoned, it would not spread too quickly. Eagle Thorn's reaction speed could not be said to be slow, and his movements were also very skillful. He almost did not make a sound, and with a few flashes, he hid behind a large tree, keeping an eye on his surroundings. He still did not discover the other party. Eagle Thorn did not dare to be careless. People nowadays preferred to use guns, and even their Black Thorn preferred to use guns to finish off their targets. However, Eagle Thorn also knew that anyone who could use such an ancient hidden weapon was obviously not a pushover. In fact, Eagle Thorn even felt that Sillin was more like a killer. He was silent, calm, and hiding in an even darker place, watching them. However, Eagle Thorn was only wary of Sillin and ignored the flying ants that were landing on his body one after another. The wound was sealed with medicine, but the 2 holes on the camouflage suit provided the flying ants with a convenient way to enter. Eagle Thorn was starting to feel that something was wrong. The biting of the flying ants was itchy and painful, and it was starting to spread all over his body. One after another, the flying ants landed on Eagle Thorn's body in search of entry points. His shoes, his trousers, the holes that were pierced, and so on. In order to prevent himself from being ambushed again, Eagle Thorn endured the discomfort that was a mixture of pain and itch. He tried his best to calm himself down and ignore those feelings, but he found it harder and harder to control his emotions. Eagle Thorn hoped that Sillin would act quickly, so that he could move a little and shake off those flying ants. However, Sillin did not move at all after that, just like a hunter quietly watching a trapped beast struggle. The flying ant's venom was not fatal, but it would stimulate a person's nerves and make them feel anxious. Now, Eagle Thorn was clearly developing in the direction of anxiety. Eagle Thorn knew that the other party was waiting for the moment when he could not endure it any longer and would deliver a fatal blow. However, the feeling of being bitten by thousands of flying ants was truly worse than death. If it was a normal person, they would have long since given up and would rather commit suicide than endure such torture. His mask was full of sweat. Eagle Thorn did not know how long he could endure it. The venom had already begun to stimulate his nerves. Eagle Thorn gritted his teeth, took a deep breath, and ran far away in a flash. Running without a fixed path would allow him to better avoid being targeted by the other party. He had to get rid of those flying ants inside his mask first, or else he would definitely be the one to lose if this dragged on. A flying ant bit through the breathing hole on his mask and crawled in, burrowing into Eagle Thorn's nostrils. Eagle Thorn's sprinting footsteps came to a halt, and it was also in this instant that a needle pierced through his throat. The fresh blood made these flying ants even more excited, because the flowing blood had a scent that they liked. More and more flying ants landed on Eagle Thorn's body, densely covering the surface of Eagle Thorn's body. Eagle Thorn soon stopped breathing. After determining that Eagle Thorn had lost all signs of life, Sillin scuttled out and walked to Eagle Thorn's side. Eagle Thorn was wearing a special camouflage suit that was infrared resistant and would change color depending on the environment. Eagle Thorn had a silenced gun in his hands, but Sillin did not touch it. This gun had been modified, and there was a miniature self-destruct device installed inside. Sillin did not want to keep a bomb by his side. Sillin found another infrasonic gun on Eagle Thorn's body and put it away after giving it a look. He could take this one. In the depths of the forest, Tiger Thorn's expression was very gloomy, because the light dot representing Eagle Thorn on his life watch the size of a pocket watch had gone out, which meant that Eagle Thorn was dead. Eagle Thorn has fallen. How is this possible? Brown Thorn ran over and looked at the life watch in Tiger Thorn's hands. Looking at the extinguished light, Brown Thorn paused for a moment. I'll go take care of that guy. Since even Eagle Thorn had fallen, then the others might not necessarily be able to get away with it. He could only do it himself. The person beside Tiger Thorn stopped Brown Thorn and said, "No need, Brown Thorn. I'll go with Snake Thorn. There's no need for you to do anything." Tiger Thorn nodded in agreement. After the two of them left, Tiger Thorn looked at another extinguished light dot on his life watch and turned to look at Teresa, who was lying on the ground. Chapter 65. The Dark Sky, the Dense Forest, and the Hidden Danger. Another 2 hours had passed, and the dense forest still looked as quiet as before. But when you actually walked in, you would realize that it was not the case. The number of excited flying ants grew, and Cylin no longer needed to search for their nest. They would naturally transmit this excitement and cause even more flying ants to become active. Tiger Thorn sat next to Teresa and stared at the biomonitor in his hand without saying a word. Brown Thorn grew a little restless and moved closer to look at the light dots on the biomonitor. There were a total of 13 people who came to 7 Lights for this operation. Including Brown Thorn and Tiger Thorn, all 13 light dots were originally on the biomonitor, but now 7, had already been extinguished. While Brown Thorn was looking at the biomonitor, another light dot had been extinguished. It looks like there are some crucial things that we really don't know. Tiger Thorn stared at the biomonitor and said, "How can a young master of the Duance family possess such skills?" Tiger Thorn pressed the sonic gun against Teresa's head. "You know, as long as I pull the trigger, those complicated nerves in your head will be thrown into chaos, and you yourself will die a very tragic death." Teresa raised her head and stared straight at Tiger Thorn. "I'm only responsible for contacting and conveying Aflon's intentions. I don't know anything else. I don't know anything about Duance Cylin's past at all." Tiger Thorn knew that Teresa was speaking the truth, but this sense of unknown about their target made Tiger Thorn very uncomfortable. In the past, they would always analyze their target before carrying out a mission to ensure that nothing would go wrong. But ever since they accepted the mission to assassinate Duance Cylin, everything had changed. The losses caused by all kinds of variables, the pressure from all sides, and those with ulterior motives eyeing them from the back had finally created Blackthorn's current situation. It was fake. False. All the information they had received about Cylin Duance back then was false. Aflon had begun his preparations more than 10 years ago, and all the information provided to them by their investors was false. Right now, they even felt that they had never understood this young master of the Duance family at all. The Black Thorn was about to disappear into the dust of history. Even if it wanted to rise again, it wouldn't be possible in a short period of time. Those people from the Duance family provided them with enough money and a sufficiently safe and hidden identity to avoid being hunted down by all parties, and the condition was that they had to kill Duance Cylin. While Tiger Thorn was deep in thought, 2 more light dots on the vital indicator went off. Brown Thorn could not help but look at Snake Thorn. "I'll contact Golden Thorn." Gold Thorn was the one who stopped Brown Thorn and entered the forest with Snake Thorn. Generally speaking, unless it was an extremely urgent matter, the commander would not easily contact the operatives because the electromagnetic waves of the receiver could expose them. Unless the operatives felt safe and took the initiative to contact the commander. But now, looking at the constantly extinguishing light spots, Brown Thorn could no longer sit still. Tiger Thorn did not say anything, which meant that he was giving his tacit approval. Brown Thorn took out his communicator. This was a communicator specially prepared for their internal personnel, and its signal coverage was set to only cover this area. It would not be received through satellites, nor would it use any other signal reception equipment in 7 Lights. However, there was no response from Gold Thorn's communicator. "Contact Snake Thorn." Right now, Tiger Thorn had an especially bad feeling. Perhaps the other party's movements were much faster than they had imagined. His vital indicator had not disappeared, but why? Unlike Golden Thorn, Snake Thorn's communicator was connected very quickly. What on earth happened? Brown Thorn asked urgently. Be careful. Snake Thorn only managed to utter 2 words before he went silent. Tiger Thorn glanced at the life indicator on his hand. The dot representing Snake Thorn was still lit up, proving that Snake Thorn was still alive. However, he could not make a single sound. Just what in the world had happened? Snake Thorn? Snake Thorn. Brown Thorn shouted twice more, but there was still no response from Snake Thorn. However, there was a blurry splashing sound that sounded like flowing liquid coming from the communicator. Snake Thorn really wanted to tell Tiger Thorn and Brown Thorn to be careful of the flying ants. His assassination skills might not be as good as Golden Thorn's, but his analysis of clues was better than Golden Thorn and Eagle Thorn's. When he arrived here, he had already noticed that something was wrong with the flying ants in the forest, but it was still too late in the end. The 3 needles on the back of his neck prevented Snake Thorn from making any sound at all. It was as if his reflexes had been cut off, rendering him immobile. The needles gradually merged into Snake Thorn's body. Snake Thorn felt all the blood in his body flowing in reverse. Blood was flowing out of his nostrils and mouth. The flying ants smelled the excitement factor in his blood and swarmed towards Snake Thorn's body. Snake Thorn's face, twisted from pain, was covered by the flying ants and could no longer be seen clearly. On Brown Thorn's side, there was an eerie silence. Even Teresa, who was lying there, felt a chill run down her spine. A gust of wind blew past, accompanied by the rustling of leaves. It was abnormally cold. After a moment of silence, clear and unhurried footsteps came from the communicator. Tiger Thorn snatched the communicator from Brown Thorn's hand and said in a deep voice, "Duance Sillin, I know you're there, beep." Before Tiger Thorn could finish his sentence, the communicator lost its connection. Although she couldn't see the face of the person on the other side of the communicator, Teresa felt that the current Sillin was so calm that it was almost cold. Before this, Teresa was still confident that she held a certain amount of weight in Sillin's heart. But from the looks of it now, Teresa suspected that if Tiger Thorn had placed her in front of him as a hostage, would Sillin have opened fire without hesitation as well? Passive to passive. Tiger Thorn and Brown Thorn felt at the same time that perhaps Duance Sillin hadn't come here for Teresa at all. Perhaps Duance Sillin's goal was the same as theirs, and that was to eliminate the other party. Perhaps. Of the 13 people, only the 2 of them were left now. Tiger Thorn grabbed Teresa's long hair and pulled her over. Brown Thorn understood and stood up to stand back to back with Tiger Thorn, vigilantly observing their surroundings. Keeping Teresa alive was their final shield. From the information given by that person from the Duance family, Tiger Thorn knew that Aflon valued Teresa very much. No matter what, Duance Sillin would still take her into consideration, at least a little. Right now, they had already noticed that the disadvantages of facing them in this forest were greater than the advantages. The dozen or so people before them had already been eliminated, so the chances of their covert assassination wouldn't be too high either. From the looks of it, they might as well come out in the open. An hour later, under Tiger Thorn and Brown Thorn's vigilance, the sound of footsteps gradually came from the distance. Brown Thorn didn't dare to act rashly. This person gave him too strange a feeling, and he didn't know if these clear footsteps were a trap of some sort. After all, no one would expose themselves so openly in a situation where they could be killed by the other party. Chapter 66. Tiger Thorn pressed his gun against Teresa's head and looked at the person who was slowly walking over. Brown Thorn's entire body was tense, and he was in a state of high alert. Duance Sillin, you truly are a character. You forced us, Black Thorn, to this extent. Even death is a consolation. Sillin did not react to Tiger Thorn's words. His footsteps were still the same as before. Tiger Thorn's gun was pressed against Teresa's head, hinting that if Sillin walked any further, he would blow up this beautiful girl's head. Although it was nighttime, Tiger Thorn could see the expression on Sillin's face. This young kid looked too indifferent and calm, making it impossible to see through him. Sillin stood still 50 meters away from Tiger Thorn and the others. He looked at Teresa, then at Brown Thorn and Tiger Thorn. You want to kill her? Maybe it was because Sillin's tone was too calm, but Teresa was a little afraid. Right now, she really could not see through Sillin, and could not guess what Sillin would do next. Or maybe it was because she did not dare to guess further. Seeing that Tiger Thorn and Brown Thorn were silent, Sillin seemed to have just thought of something. "Oh, you want to use her to threaten me?" Sillin's tone made Tiger Thorn very uncomfortable. It was as if he had been slapped in the face. "Your father, Aflon, values her very much. But you'll still kill her. If you can't do it, why don't I help you?" Sillin had just finished speaking when 3 needles flew straight out and shot towards Teresa, who was standing in front of Tiger Thorn. Sillin got up and retreated hastily at the same time the needles were shot. A bullet hole appeared almost as soon as he jumped away from his original spot. When Sillin threw out the needles, Brown Thorn, who had been watching him vigilantly all this time, opened fire without hesitation. However, Sillin's movements were very fast. Sillin practically brushed past 2 of the bullets and retreated into the forest with a few flashes. Brown Thorn did not give chase. If he followed Sillin inside, his fate would definitely be no different from Snake Thorn and the others. After returning to Tiger Thorn's side, Brown Thorn looked at Teresa, who was no longer breathing after being flung to the ground by Tiger Thorn. There were still traces of blood at the corner of her mouth. Seemingly in disbelief, Brown Thorn checked Teresa's pulse and heartbeat before he said with a frown, "That kid is really ruthless. He is not a person who can be threatened." Tiger Thorn stared at the spot where Sillin had hidden himself in the forest and said in a low voice, "I don't think he looks like a rich young master. He looks more like a certain type of person." "Killers like us?" "No, it's a hunter. No matter what kind of person he is, he must die." Previously, they wanted to use Teresa to lure Sillin over, but they didn't expect Sillin to kill Teresa the moment he saw her. There were only the 3 of them left in the forest. A chase was taking place in the forest. Tiger Thorn and Brown Thorn were afraid that Sillin would lead them into a trap, so they would observe carefully every time they gave chase. They would only continue after confirming that there was no danger. However, Sillin was too slippery. Every time they raised their guns, Sillin would dodge as if he could sense it. Suddenly, Tiger Thorn's alarm bells rang out. He abruptly exerted force with his foot on the ground, leaving a deep footprint where he stood as he dodged the incoming attacks. Just like Tiger Thorn, Brown Thorn also dodged and dodged. Needles were not the only things shooting at them. There were also bullets. What surprised Tiger Thorn and Brown Thorn was that the speed of these needles was actually about the same as bullets. At the same time, Tiger Thorn also noticed something else. These needles were different from the ones used to kill Teresa. Tiger Thorn's night vision was very good. He could clearly see the needles shattering when they pierced into trees or collided with rocks. Then they would melt and evaporate. Poison. Tiger Thorn held his breath and swiftly applied a layer of anti-poison film on his breathing mask. After seeing Tiger Thorn's signal, Brown Thorn also prepared to apply a layer of anti-poison film on his breathing mask. After all, it was not a specialized anti-poison mask. Although this kind of anti-poison film could protect against poison, it would affect one's breathing to a certain extent. A normal person might not be able to adapt to it, but Tiger Thorn and Brown Thorn could endure it for a very long time. However, they usually wouldn't use anti-poison films. However, just as Brown Thorn took out the anti-poison film and was about to apply it, a bullet shot into his temple. Brown Thorn was hiding behind a rock. The rock could block the enemy's shots, and he had blocked several shots just now. Almost 10 needles had collided with the rock, but he never imagined that he would be killed in one shot under such circumstances. A curved shot. Seeing all of this, Tiger Thorn immediately understood that the kid's previous shots were all intentional. His previous shots were all straight, but this shot was curved. Normally, this kind of person only existed in military academies. Why would such a person appear in Seven Lights? Tiger Thorn didn't have the time to think about these things. He was alone now, and he needed to focus all of his energy on guarding against that kid. Perhaps even Tiger Thorn himself did not know that the #1 priority in his subconscious mind was no longer to kill Sillin, but to guard against him. Strangely, Sillin didn't move at all, and he quieted down after firing a shot. Then, Tiger Thorn saw a shocking scene. A large swarm of flying ants flew towards him and landed on the already dead Brownthorn's body. They especially landed on the bleeding areas, forming a black mass. This was indeed a psychological blow to Tiger Thorn, and it was also at this moment that a dozen or so needles shot towards him. Tiger Thorn dodged to the side, but in the next moment, a figure swiftly arrived. Tiger Thorn's speed wasn't slow either. He raised his gun. The gun barrel was twisted like a fried dough twist, and at the same time, a needle pierced into Tiger Thorn's heart. Before he died, Tiger Thorn suddenly thought of something. From the moment he met Sillin until now, even when Sillin fired at them, he didn't have the slightest murderous intent. Moreover, Sillin wasn't wearing a camouflage suit, and yet the infrared detection didn't detect anything out of the ordinary. Sillin Duance. This man was like a cold-blooded animal. Not only did he possess the coldness of a killer, he also possessed the blood of a cold-blooded animal. This was Tiger Thorn's evaluation of Sillin before he died. But if Mo Heng knew that someone had such an evaluation of Sillin, he would probably grab his weapon and throw it at him. His disciple wasn't a cold-blooded animal. Not cold at all. It was only after he looked at the biomonitor in Tiger Thorn's hands and finished off the last one and extinguished all the dots on the biomonitor that Sillin finally let out a sigh of relief. The half-life of the drug that excited the flying ants was 12 hours, and it would break down once the time was up. Therefore, he didn't have to worry too much, and no one would discover this drug even if they came to the woods in the future. Sillin rejoiced that the true core members of Blackthorn had all been eliminated. If the ones here today were the true core assassins of Blackthorn, he wouldn't have been so lucky. Indeed, the strength of an organization that could occupy a certain position on the assassin leaderboard was absolutely not to be underestimated. Sillin had felt it when he was dealing with Tiger Thorn and the others today. If it wasn't for Sillin's trickery of using those flying ants, it would have been very difficult for him to achieve a good result today. Even if these people who weren't core members had this kind of strength, how strong would the core members be? How strong were the people who had killed the core members of Blackthorn? It wasn't just one person or a few people who had eliminated the core members of Blackthorn. It could have been another organization, a family's hidden hand, or an army. Sillin would also encounter these forces when he returned to the 6th team in the future. He loosened his shoulders. His arms were sore from swinging bullets and needles today. After cleaning up the various traces of battle, Sillin walked over to Teresa's side. If he didn't go over now, she would probably really be dead. Chapter 67. Speaking of which, when Knight woke up from holding back his pee in the morning, he immediately felt that his stomach was empty. He went to the storage cabinet in the kitchen and took a look. There was nothing else there other than a few lonely pieces of bread. Knight scratched his head. He remembered that Sillin said he was going out for a stroll last night to buy some food. Why was it still empty? Sillin, Knight roared at the top of his lungs. No response. He ran to Sillin's bedroom and study. No one there. He dialed his communicator. No one answered. Left with no choice, Knight used GPS to track Sillin's communicator. However, the signal showed that he was in Sillin's bedroom. Sillin's communicator was placed inside the bedside table. Knight looked at the time. There were still 3 hours until their next match. On the other side, Teresa saw a dark gold color when she opened her eyes. There was even a string of flashing numbers on it. Beside the numbers was a knife-shaped symbol. The receipt of the Vanguard Hunter Group. The receipt was given to Sillin by Schotten when he left the 6th team. The thought that Schotten had instilled into Sillin was this: we're hunters. We can't work, sweat, and sweat without any money, can we? Moreover, people like Aflon wouldn't care about some small money. Therefore, he couldn't hide the receipt when he could, and couldn't retract his knife when he could. A hunter should treat themselves a little better, and be a little more ruthless to their investors. This time, he had helped Aflon solve a huge problem, and even saved Teresa's life. He had to ask for a bit more reward no matter what. Sillin didn't hold back at all. He directly wrote an 8-digit number on the receipt. No one would be able to detect a fake death unless they used a sophisticated life detector. The reason Sillin shot the needle at Teresa was to fake her death. Only then would he be able to save Teresa, and most importantly, he wouldn't be tied down by his own hands and feet. Moreover, if Teresa died, Aflon definitely wouldn't pay much. When Teresa woke up, she didn't say anything about the number on the bill. She just looked at Sillin with a complicated expression. Truth be told, when Sillin walked out with a calm and indifferent expression as if he didn't care about anything, Teresa didn't expect Sillin to care about her life at all. Sometimes, a hunter was very similar to an assassin. They were ruthless, cold, and merciless. Moreover, when Sillin said to Tiger Thorn and Brown Thorn, "Why don't I help you?" Teresa felt her entire body turn ice cold. The moment she lost consciousness after being stabbed by the needles Sillin flung at her, Teresa felt despair. Teresa realized that she had been underestimating this person who was even younger than her. The look in Sillin's eyes made Teresa feel as if Sillin knew everything, but she wasn't sure. After all, there were only 5 people who knew the secret, and those 5 people would never reveal it unless it was the right time. "How much do you know?" "This is all I know." Sillin pointed at the dazzling bill in front of Teresa. "Remember to transfer it to your account in time. Of course, if you want to thank me more, I won't refuse." Putting away the bill, Teresa tried to stand up, but she was still a little dizzy. She could only sit back down. "What on earth happened?" Teresa asked. Sillin did not answer the question directly and said, "You still need some time to recover. I believe you can contact someone to take you back. If that's the case, I won't stay any longer." "Wait a minute," Teresa called out to Sillin, who was about to turn around and leave. "Those people are all dead?" Sillin nodded. Teresa took a deep breath and calmed her emotions. "Since those people are all dead, Mr. Aflon's side will speed up his actions. Therefore, you need to be prepared in advance." He knew what Teresa meant when she said to be prepared in advance, so he made an understood gesture before disappearing into the forest in a flash. When Sillin returned to the dormitory, Knight was talking to C.I. Jincheng and Lung on the communicator to discuss countermeasures. "Sillin, did you go for a stroll to another planet?" Knight rushed up and grabbed Sillin by the collar and roared. However, his expression softened a little when he saw the bag in Sillin's hands. Sillin had gone to the supermarket to buy food on his way back. It looked like this was the right decision. "Sillin, if you still don't come back, I'm going to send people to search for you. We need to discuss our strategy and bet an hour before the match," Lung urged from the other side of the communicator. That being said, Sillin knew that Lung, C.I. Jincheng, and Knight were truly concerned about him. Smiling, Sillin said, "Bet on 1-hit kill for the next match." Lung's eyes lit up when he heard this. Their opponents this time were the last tournament's champions, the Visby brothers. The odds must be shocking. Knight rubbed his chin. "It's going to be very difficult." "All right, look at that grin on your face." On the communicator's display panel, C.I. Jincheng's face was full of disdain. "All right. Sillin, do you want to become the champion of the double combat tournament?" Knight looked at Sillin. "I don't want to, but if you want to take it, you can take it." "How good you're a brother." "I'm relieved to hear that. The reason I'm participating in the double combat tournament is to avenge a friend and teach the Visby brothers a lesson. I don't want to fight anymore after I beat the Visby brothers." His father had already given him a hard time when he participated in this tournament. If he continued to fight, Knight might get beaten up by his father when he got back. In his father's words, the thunderstorm fist was not meant to be played around. It lived on the battlefield, not these childish games that were purely for the sake of attracting students. The students who were treated as secret weapons of the military academies would not participate in these tournaments. That was because they were busy with missions and could already be considered as warriors. They had no interest in the little games between students, and even if they participated, they would not use their full strength. Exposing their true strength to the public was even more disadvantageous to them. All right, this was for the best. Sillin still had to prepare for the aftermath, and ending it earlier would save him some time. Sigh, I wonder how much resentment those who went after Shadow X will feel. Lung sighed sadly on the other side. Lung, remember to bet again. Maybe you'll break a new record. C.I. Jincheng said. Since he returned earlier than expected, Sillin deleted the messages and traces in his answering machine and took a short nap. Then he logged onto the Sector Championships platform with Knight. Knight and the other two did not ask what Sillin had been up to during the night. Even if Sillin did not say, they had already guessed some of it. Just as C.I. Jincheng had said, the match against the Visby brothers after that had broken the record of the top 16. This match was very short, even shorter than the previous match against Lu Yewu and One Smile Kill. Instant kill. The moment the system displayed the start of the match, Sillin and Knight immediately moved. Their movements were so fast that the Visby brothers could only block them without being able to dodge in time. The violent lightning created by Knight's fists had already rendered one of them unable to fight. The other person facing Sillin did not feel good either. It was as if he had crashed into a mechanical armor, instantly losing his ability to fight as well. At the same time the system displayed Knight and Shadow X duo wins. It also displayed the eye-catching cursor of this match's record-breaking. After a moment of silence, the students in front of their microcomputers were completely fired up. Instant kill, it was actually an instant kill. But not long after their excitement, a piece of news pressed down on them like an iceberg. Knight and Shadow X had withdrawn from the double combat tournament. A lot of people came here for Shadow X, and without Shadow X, they lost half of their interest. Half an hour later, Kamas, Feng Haichao, Bohr, Faradin, Ryan, Bon and other teams had withdrawn from the double combat tournament. This way, there really was nothing to see in the double combat tournament. Their boiling blood had been frozen, and the students were filled with resentment. The entire Sector Championship forum's layout was filled with thick resentment. Celine and the others didn't pay attention to the students' reactions. After Sillin and Knight had announced their withdrawal, Knight received a message from Kamas in his mailbox on the Sector Championship platform. As for Sillin's mailbox, there were a lot of messages, but Sillin basically did not bother to look at them. Sillin, Kamas and the others want to fight us in the final Integrated Warfare tournament. Knight was much more interested in Integrated Warfare, because Integrated Warfare was actual combat. Only the academies that entered the top 10 of the rankings could participate in the following practical combat tournament. However, with Seven Lights Foundation, entering the top 10 was not a problem at all. Sure, I look forward to it. Sillin did not refuse. The Integrated Warfare tournament was also a great opportunity for him. Chapter 68. Another week had passed since the end of the small competitions. The large team competition, mech combat, gunfight, armored combat and so on had also ended one after another. According to the ranking points of each competition, the top 10 universities could participate in the Integrated Warfare contest. Seven Lights was still 5th place this time, and the higher-ups of Seven Lights were very satisfied with this ranking. It was not easy to conquer a country, and even harder to defend it. However, the final ranking had not been decided yet. The Integrated Warfare contest's points accounted for 30% of the total points, and many schools had staged a spectacular comeback in the final Integrated Warfare contest. The electronic magazine Gathering of Winds and Clouds had reported some of the highlights of the contest in a special section. Unlike previous years, the topic that took up the most space this year was not the champion and runner-up of the large competitions or duels, but a guy who looked like a generic robot. Shadow X had set off a hurricane of attention on the Sector Championship platform on the first day of his appearance. Then, all kinds of unusual events happened one after another, and it was exactly because of his appearance that he attracted some of the military academy's seed students who had never appeared before. These students participated with Shadow X's participation, and left with Shadow X's withdrawal. All of the focus was on Shadow X. There was an authoritative critic who commented on Gathering of Winds and Clouds that Shadow X was a supernova that was in no way inferior to the military academy's top students. Some people said that the critic was exaggerating a little. No matter how excellent an academy at Sector B was, there was no way they could surpass the top students at Sector C, right? Some people agreed with the critic's words, but even more people maintained a wait-and-see attitude. The Integrated Warfare contest was the competition that tested a student's ability the most. Whether they were gold or scrap metal would be known in a single match. Most importantly, Shadow X's true identity would be exposed in the integrated warfare contest. The people of every university counted down the days and looked forward to it every day. Each university would send 10 people to participate in the integrated warfare contest, and each university would choose 10 people based on their students' abilities. The person in charge of the selection was the head of the training division, but Juanil had gone to Sector C to report on the last biochemical base operation. Therefore, the selection this time was taken over by Gerard. Gerard would choose suitable people and report them to the higher-ups of Seven Lights. At the same time, it would be announced on the Seven Lights forum so that the students of Seven Lights would know. If there were no major problems, the higher-ups of Seven Lights would finalize the final list. The students who wanted to participate in the integrated warfare contest would submit their ID and battle records on the sector championship platform to Gerard for review. Normally speaking, the higher the battle record, the higher the chances of being selected. Everyone was eager to participate in the integrated battle. Anyone who thought they had some ability would report their information. When they graduated, if their graduation information included their experience in the Sector Comprehensive Championship, then they would be in a much better position after they left campus. They could straighten their backs and shout boldly, "Look, we've participated in the Sector Championship." Gerard was lying lazily in his office, looking at the list of names and battle records on the screen in front of him. There were nearly 1,000 people who had signed up for the competition, and some of them kicked Gerard out the moment they saw him. With Gerard's many years of experience, he knew which of them were strong on the outside but weak on the inside, and which of them had real skills and strong qualities, just by looking at the battle videos. There were only 10 people participating in the integrated warfare, but 3 of them had already been decided internally. This was decided long ago by the school's higher-ups. But seeing that the 3 people who had been decided internally were really capable, Gerard had no objections. The 3 that had been decided internally were Fu Luo, Kong Man, and C.I. Jincheng. Fu Luo, vice headmaster and Ting's precious granddaughter, a top student in the medical school. Medical personnel were a necessity in the integrated warfare, so Gerard had no objections at all towards Fu Luo. Kong Man, a specially recruited student, an information technology developer in the scientific research department. At a young age, he had already published his results in a journal with a high degree of contribution. He had a very good understanding of positioning, teleportation, and secret code decryption. He belonged to the category of technical personnel, which was also necessary. As for C.I. Jincheng, even if he didn't know what illustrious achievements C.I. Jincheng had, Gerard would have to think twice before objecting. People might only know some superficial things about the C.I. family, but Gerard had heard some things about the C.I. family. However, those things were classified as secrets, and no one dared to say it out loud. Gerard held his chin and moved his finger over the button, flipping through the student's information page by page. Suddenly, Gerard's hand paused. He straightened his body and moved closer to the screen. "This bastard!" Gerard couldn't help but curse with a smile. There were 2 pictures on the screen. One was Silin's picture, and the other was Shadow X in the form of a generic robot. Below the pictures were the relevant battle records. Gerard didn't need to look at the battle records to drag Silin into the list straight away. After the last biochemical base mission, everyone in the training division and the police division were full of praise for this little guy who wasn't even 20 years old yet. Be it personal strength or technical application, Silin's performance had far surpassed the average student. Next on Silin's list was Knight. Gerard didn't need to look at the others because he dragged Knight's face straight into the list the moment he saw it. This was a good seedling that should have gone to a military academy in the first place. The descendant of a general, his strength was unquestionable, and there was nothing to nitpick about. Moreover, even if Gerard didn't choose him, as long as Knight expressed his desire to participate in the integrated warfare contest, the higher-ups of Seven Lights would still add him into the list. After flipping through a few more people, Gerard chose Pride, Surd, and Hard. Now there were 8 of them. There were still 2 left. Gerard rubbed his sore eyes and was about to drip 2 drops of eye drops when his communicator rang. Gerard looked at the name displayed on the interface and curled his lips. Fine, it's most likely another backdoor opening through connections. Gerard's guess was correct. The call was from the Lord Headmaster of Seven Lights himself. Someone had sought out the headmaster and asked him to negotiate with Gerard. This person was none other than young Master Lung of the so poor that only has money family. Originally, young Master Lung really didn't plan to participate in this integrated warfare contest. He had no money to participate in this thing, and he didn't care about honor or whatever. However, he felt awkward when the other 3 people in the dormitory were participating, so he ran to Seven Lights' headmaster's doorstep in a slipper and waited for him. Gerard didn't know much about the Andriera family. The public's impression of them was that they were so poor that only has money family. But in reality, it was more than that. Even if he didn't know much about the Andriera family, Gerard still knew some bits of information. The Andriera family was familiar with many of the bigwigs in the military, and many of the military's weapons were provided by the Andriera family. The Andriera family paid a lot for the military's expenses. Gerard couldn't object because of this. The headmaster would be the one to step in anyway. The old headmaster would take responsibility if anything happened. As for the last person, Gerard chose the 5th place of this single combat tournament. His name was Copley. As for why he was only 5th place, there was no need to explain. The military academy was right in front of him. The reason he chose this person wasn't just because of his results in the single combat tournament. It was more because of this person. Copley wasn't a normal human. He was a Hassenfess. A normal human static plane of view was only 100 or so degrees, but a Hassenfess could see more than 270 degrees. Their eyes were more inclined to the sides compared to normal humans, which was why they had this advantage. Their wide field of view and sensitive vision made them better at investigation. This is it. 10 people. 3 were predetermined, and 1 was a backdoor candidate. Gerard chose 6 himself. This was the first list. After that, Gerard chose a few more candidates. After he was done, he submitted the list. Sigh, I wonder how the people in Seven Lights will react when they see Silin's ID. Chapter 69. Due to the integrated warfare contest, C.I. Jincheng returned to Planet Seven Lights early. Inside the accommodation, Silin, Knight and C.I. Jincheng sat in the living room and watched the past integrated warfare contests. There were 2 locations for the integrated warfare. First, they had to gather on an asteroid, Planet CN976, which was overseen by the JL Army at the border between Sector B and Sector C. The teams from the 10 universities would undergo identity checks, be given tools and so on. Then, they would depart for their destination at the same time, another military-supervised asteroid CN300. While the trio were watching the video, the door to the accommodation opened, and Lung walked in proudly wearing his trademark singlet, flowery shorts and slippers. Humph, I can participate in the integrated warfare contest like you guys now. Kicking his slippers to the shoe rack, Lung walked barefoot to the living room and took out a bottle of cold beer from the fridge. Then, he sat on the sofa like Silin and the other 2. Seeing that Silin and the other 2 did not respond, Lung shouted in dissatisfaction, "Hey, aren't you curious?" Silin and the other 2 looked at Lung at the same time with a curious about what look on their faces. Lung grinned, "I woke up early in the morning to stop the Lord Headmaster and ask him to open the back door for me." Silin and the other 2 were speechless. He was the only one who could walk through the back door with such confidence. Although the name list had not been finalized yet, it was certain that these 4 would be in the top 10. The next day, the list of 10 candidates was announced on the Seven Lights forum. After seeing the name list and information display, there would be unknown people loitering around Silin and the others' accommodation at every moment, wanting to see what Shadow X's true identity looked like. Shadow X's information display that everyone was looking forward to was shockingly nuanced Silin's name. The first reaction of the Seven Lights students when they saw it was, "What the fuck? Why is it him?" At the time, Alan wanted to cry but had no tears. Now he finally understood that he had been tricked by Silin. Other than word games, Alan had also vaguely guessed some things. Sure enough, it was just like what his father had said. He had to trust his first instinct. Otherwise, he would be fooled. Although the name list that was announced caused a great commotion, in truth, there were not many who objected to it. There were still a lot of people who doubted the news that Sillin was Shadow X at first, but they were relieved when they thought about it. After all, he had participated in a military mission, gone to the battlefield, killed black mice, and was familiar with Knight and the others. Even if they wanted to object to it, they would have to consider whether they had the ability to do so. Since there were no major problems, the higher-ups of Seven Lights quickly made their decision and officially confirmed the list of 10. Fu Luo, Sillin, Knight, Surd, Hard, Lung, Pride, Ci Jincheng, Kong Man, Copley. It was worth mentioning that 6 out of the 10 were new students. It didn't matter if they were specially recruited students or not. In short, if they could achieve a good result in the integrated warfare contest this time, then this phenomenon would be used by Seven Lights as an advertisement. The day before the integrated warfare competition, the 4 of them were tidying up in the living room when Sillin's communicator suddenly rang. Not long after, Sillin walked out. "I'm going out for a while." Lung narrowed his eyes. "A date?" Before he left, Sillin even snatched a bag of dried meat from Knight. "Holy shit, you better return it double when you come back." Knight yelled at the top of his lungs. Sillin waved his hand, indicating that he understood. Lung watched Sillin leave on a hoverboard and let out a vulgar laugh. "It's not a date? Who would believe that? Guess who Sillin is going on a date with? Is there even a need to guess? Of course it's Beauty Sa. He'll definitely give her a goodbye kiss." Knight opened the cabinet and counted how many bags of dried meat he still had. He planned to bring all of them with him tomorrow. "Not necessarily. I heard that Ling Long from the research division is a little interested in Sillin as well." While saying this, Lung even purposely displayed Ling Long's image for Knight and Ci Jincheng to see. Not bad, right? She's also an elite of the research division. Before Lung could finish, the dormitory's doorbell rang. Who would come at this time? Lung muttered and reluctantly ended his sentence. He turned on the display and looked at the person standing outside the door. After seeing the image on the display, Knight and Ci Jincheng turned to look at Lung. Lung raised his hands. "All right, pretend I didn't say anything." The person who came was Ling Long. This was the first time Ling Long came to their dormitory. After entering the room, Ling Long was obviously disappointed when she did not see Sillin at first glance. Ci Jincheng looked at the time. Sillin left for 2 minutes and 25 seconds. Judging by Sillin's speed on a hoverboard, you won't be able to catch up. Ling Long frowned, looked at the decorations inside the dormitory and accepted the water lungs robot pass to her. "When is Sillin coming back?" "That I don't know. Who knows what he and Beauty Sa are going to do?" Lung did not know if Knight's words were intentional or not, but when Ling Long heard this, Lung clearly felt the pressure around him become much lower. The trio pretended that they did not see the pitiful cup in Ling Long's hand that cracked a few times and tidied up the things in their hands. Knight had flipped a singlet over and over again countless times, and he looked pretty busy. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours passed, and Sillin still had not returned. Sillin had left his communicator at the dormitory, so he could not be contacted. Feeling the pressure around Ling Long growing lower and lower, Knight gave Lung a look, and Lung expressed that he could not do anything. However, after Ling Long received a message, the trio suddenly felt as if spring had bloomed inside the room. A bright smile appeared on Ling Long's face as she stood up and said, "Sillin has gone to Professor Mo's place. It should be a while before he returns, so I won't disturb you any longer. Goodbye." After Ling Long left, Ci Jincheng said thoughtfully, "She looks a little familiar." Sillin had indeed been summoned by Sir Mo with a call. Since Sillin had gone straight to Mo Heng's staff dormitory in Seven Lights instead of the research division, Ling Long had received the news a little later than usual. Mo Heng was a little dissatisfied with Sillin's participation in the sector championship, so he asked Sillin to assemble another machine before he left. If he passed, then he could participate in the integrated warfare contest. If he failed, then he would have to obediently stay in the research division and assemble machines. Mo Heng did not ask for a particular machine to be assembled. He allowed Sillin to design and choose his own parts to assemble. As the vice headmaster, Mo Heng had a special workshop in the dormitory. There were plenty of parts and equipment, and they were all high-end products. Sillin had spent a lot of thought on this machine, so it took him a little longer than usual to assemble it. Sillin was very satisfied with the machine he assembled. After the assembly was complete, the inspection results were also very satisfactory. There was no regression, and it was still 97%. That was why 2 clear finger marks were left on Sillin's face. Sillin suspected that he would return to the baby fat stage if this continued. After leaving Mo Heng's dormitory, Sillin went to the research division and tidied up the things in the workshop. When he walked out of the research division, he ran into Teresa, and Teresa said with a smile, "Congratulations to your father for winning the position of heir." She did not say much, it was just one sentence, but there was too much information contained within it. Everything was understood without words. It was time to end the mission. Chapter 70. Over at the training division, the sky was just beginning to brighten, and the place was already active an hour earlier than usual. The students attending military class had surprisingly early start and ran to the training division's specially set up port. They all stretched their necks and looked around. Gerard ignored them. This was something that happened every year, and it might not necessarily be a bad thing for these students. At the very least, it could stimulate them to work harder. Not long after, a passenger flying car landed at the port's parking spot. The first person to walk down from the car was a dean of 7 lights, followed by Fu Luo, Pride, Knight, Sillin. All 10 of them were wearing specially made uniforms that were sky blue in color. The 7 lights integrated warfare uniform was different every year. The 7 colors alternated between each year. Last year it was green, so this year's main color was blue after green. Printed on the chest of the uniform were the 7 light school insignia of red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and purple. The back of the jacket had the 7 lights logo and the students' names. Everyone's uniform was unique. This uniform symbolized a kind of honor, the honor of representing 7 lights in the sector championship integrated warfare. The moment they saw them, the surrounding students began to discuss among themselves. Which one? Which one is Shadow X? The one beside Fu Luo, the one with light gray hair, he's Shadow X. I can't tell. The 10 of them ignored what the students were saying about them and followed the head of teaching. Sillin and the other 3 were still in a daze. Lung, who was so excited that he couldn't sleep last night, had dragged the 3 of them to play cards for the entire night. Although he had won every cent of the black rat claws in Lung's pocket, he had sacrificed his sleep time. That was why all 4 of them came over with dark circles under their eyes in the morning. Yo, the 4 of you went to catch thieves last night? Gerard looked at the group of people walking over. His gaze landed on Sillin and the others, and he immediately noticed their serious lack of sleep. We played cards for the entire night. Sillin covered Lung's mouth just as he was about to continue speaking. Only an idiot like him would speak the truth so confidently in a situation like this. Didn't he see the veins popping out on the teaching director's forehead? Knight and C.I. Jincheng turned their heads away from Lung at the same time. Dude, can you be any more idiotic than that? The dean's task was to hand these 10 people over to Gerard, who would lead the team to planet CN976. After the 2 finished talking, Gerard led the 10 people to board the starship. There was 7 lights insignia on the starship, and there were other medical and staff members inside. These people were all selected through training, and most of them were from the training division and the security division. The starship had arranged individual lounges for the 10 of them. After Sillin and the other 3 boarded the starship, they went straight to the lounge to catch up on sleep. The others also found it boring and returned to their own lounges to watch the video recordings of the previous integrated warfare battles. In the next few days on the starship, Gerard told them some things to pay attention to and some past experiences, and then answered their questions. In order to achieve good results, the most important thing was cooperation. So Gerard gave them more time to get used to each other so that they would not mess up. By the time Sillin's group arrived at planet CN976, the people from the 4 military academies were already there. Other than that, there were also 2 teams from Sector B's universities who had arrived earlier than them. Just like the 7 light students, They were most concerned about Shadow X's true identity. But when they saw Sillin, they found it very hard to believe that he was Shadow X. From the outside, Sillin did not look like the Shadow X in everyone's hearts. He looked more like a rich young master. There was a 12-floor building in the camp built specifically for the participating students. The second floor was the dining hall, and above the second floor were the dormitories. Each team occupied one floor, and the universities had decided their floor by drawing lots beforehand. Therefore, it was already decided which floor they would be staying on, and there was nothing to object to even if they had any opinions. There was also a wide gym next to the student dormitories. There were indoor gyms and outdoor gyms, and Sillin and the others were familiar with the indoor gyms. The outdoor gyms were much more abundant. There were hoverboards, flying cars, armors, fighter jets, and so on. Moreover, they were all military grade, and their performance was much better than the average. When a lot of students came here, they could even fly their fighter jets out for a spin if they were bored. Unfortunately, the scenery here wasn't that great. There were either mechanized buildings everywhere, or large areas of field battlefields. Green hills and clear waters were out of the question, and a myriad of colors could only be seen in one's dreams. Sillin, do you want to give it a try? Knight hooked his arm around Sillin's shoulder and pointed at the fighter jet parked on the field. Fighter jets might be a little new to other students. After all, they could only come into contact with them on the virtual platform, and not many people had flown real fighter jets before. But Knight came into contact with them at a very early age. Before he could even walk, his father had carried him on a stroll in the plane. Of course, Knight was staying inside the protective cabin at the time. Otherwise, it would have been more than enough to handle with Knight's infant physique at the time. Sure. Sillin answered straightforwardly. I want to participate too. Why don't the four of us have a match? Lung pointed at C.I. Jincheng, who was reading at the back, and said, Good idea. C.I. Jincheng, do you want to come? Knight looked at C.I. Jincheng. C.I. Jincheng closed his book. Of course. The four of us in the dorm will go for a walk. Pride raised his chin and snorted. What's there to walk about? These planes didn't even have homing missiles on them. They were completely placed here to fool the students. Only those who had never seen or flown a fighter jet before would be curious about them. Knight's eyes slanted at Pride's disdainful snort. The one who loses in a fight has no right to snort. Pride's face turned bright red from Knight's words. He wanted nothing more than to charge at Knight and fight it out with him. He had indeed lost 2 out of 3 fights against Knight on the Sector Championships platform. If one wanted to use a fighter jet in the training field, they would need to register first. Serd and the others had wanted to try flying as well, but since Knight said that the 4 of them wanted to compete first, Serd decided to wait and see how they flew first. Although he had touched fighter jets before, this was Sector C after all. Serd felt even more excited. Sillin and the other 3 had chosen the same model. After registering, the 4 of them boarded their respective fighter jets. Not far away, the people of the 4 military academies, be it in the training room or the accommodation, all smiled expectantly when they saw the 4 fighter jets taking off from the training field. Kamas leaned against the railing and watched the 4 fighter jets take off into the distance. He said, They'll probably encounter that situation too, won't they? Feng Haichao turned on the display device on his hand, and the hologram that popped up showed the images of the 4 fighters. Of course, those people up there love to tease the students. Knight probably wouldn't have thought that something like that would happen in a place like this either. However, he wouldn't be able to notify the others when he discovered it. I'm so looking forward to it. Yu Lu yawned and moved closer to the hologram. Chapter 71. On the other side of the camp, the team leaders and the officers stationed at the camp were gathered together and chatting. The lowest military rank of the people in this room was Lieutenant Colonel. Since there was no one else around, these usually stern officers were more casual now. Judging from their tone of conversation, they were all familiar with each other. Gerard, why are you leading the team this time? Wasn't it always Huanil before? Someone asked. Everyone knew that the thing Gerard disliked the most was being a babysitter. Therefore, when Gerard and Juanil were sent to Planet 7 Lights, Gerard chose the security division and not the training division. Gerard did not have the patience to take care of those young masters and ladies in the training division. He could lead troops, but not students. If the things he learned from his superiors were applied to the students, they would probably lose a layer of skin in less than 2 days, even if they didn't die. Moreover, many of the students in 7 Lights had some background. Gerard wasn't afraid of them, but he didn't want to get himself into trouble. Gerard couldn't be bothered to deal with those twists and turns. That was why Juanil had been the one leading the integrated warfare for the past few years. Juanil has something to do, so I'll be leading this time. But you don't look like you're unwilling. You used to be an excuse, didn't you? The speaker kicked Gerard on the chair and said, "It's mainly because the candidates this time are pretty good. I even picked 6 of them myself." Gerard wanted to laugh when he thought of those people in the team. God knows what kind of trouble those bastards would cause. You even picked 6 of them yourself? Only 4 of us were chosen by me, the other 6 were decided internally, another man complained. People like them always spoke with strength, but Sector B's rules were obviously a little more complicated. Sigh, let's not talk about those annoying topics. Being a babysitter is already annoying enough, and you still have to talk about them here. Someone slapped the armrest of the chair and said, the team leaders and station officers of the 4 military academies were amused. Thank goodness they weren't assigned to Sector B. Speaking of which, Gerard, you'll be back in a year, right? A station officer said. Yeah. Gerard couldn't be more excited at the mention of this. They all had 5 years of missions. Once the mission was over and they returned to the army, their military ranks would rise as well. Right now, both Gerard and Juanil were senior colonels. Their next step was to be promoted to Major General. Hey, congratulations on being free first. We still have 2 more years. Don't forget to treat us when the time comes. As they were talking, someone suddenly said, Hey, Gerard, it's the kid from your team. Gerard looked at the screen that the man was pointing at and chuckled. Why is it these 4 guys again? The others also looked at the screen. There was a list at the side, showing the registration of the fighter jets. I knew Knight wouldn't be able to hold back. There were a few people here who were soldiers under Knight's father like Gerard, so they were familiar with Knight. This is the Shadow X they're talking about. One of them pointed at Cylin. There's even the eldest young master of the Andryra family. I heard that the old generals were so pissed off by the old Andryra family's old man that they almost vomited blood. They all knew about the trivial matters between the old Andryra family's old man and the military's elders. They quarreled almost every other day, but it had been almost 100 years, and they never got serious. Yet, they always liked to pick each other's faults and cause a quarrel. Some of the military's funds were swindled from the old Andryra family by the old generals. Those who could swindle things from the Andryra family were all old foxes. As for C.I. Jincheng, they tacitly avoided talking about him. They didn't want to talk about the surname C.I. too much. Want to tease them? Nonsense, do you want to waste such a good opportunity? They've delivered themselves to our doorstep. Gerard dragged a chair over. Go ahead and tease them, these 4 guys have strong endurance. Roger, the officer rolled up his sleeves excitedly, flexed his fingers and chuckled mischievously. Other than him, the others in the room also dragged their chairs over and gathered in front of the screen, their eyes full of interest as they watched. At this moment, the 4 people who were happily flying in the air were still chatting leisurely. They hadn't entered their competitive state yet. In reality, most of the time, Cylin and the other 2 were listening to Lung's shouts through their earphones. Wow, there's a sea. I didn't expect there to be a sea here. Cylin, look, the shape of the reef area on the sea looks like the buttocks of a voluptuous beauty when she bends down. Cylin and the other 2. Wouldn't most people use the shape of a heart to describe it? Why does everything sound different when it comes out of this guy's mouth? Over at the surveillance room, Gerard face-bombed. He had already experienced this guy's idiotic nature, so he was somewhat prepared. Meanwhile, the few people leading the team in the room looked at the garrison officers with an expression that said, so you guys like this. The garrison officers were so angry that they wanted to run over and beat that guy up. That reef area was formed naturally, it had nothing to do with them. Now they finally understood why the old generals were always so angry at the old man of the Andrira family. There was a drill going on in the sea below, and the underwater explosion had raised the seawater there high up. Since it wasn't a regular drill, this area wasn't locked down. But most students who passed by this area in their fighter jets would be smart enough to avoid it. Oh, that's caused by a torpedo? Torpedo? How spectacular! It's an eye-opener. Bullshit. Bullshit. Have you really never seen a torpedo before? The number of torpedoes your family makes is enough to destroy an entire sector. The officers in the surveillance room were so angry that they wanted to pull out their guns and rush over. How could this bastard say the bullshit of eye-opening in such a tone so calmly? Gerard continued to hold his forehead. After a garrison officer opened his communicator and issued a few orders, someone on the warship on the sea opened fire at the sky. Although the people on the sea opened fire at the sky, their intentions were clear. They were only trying to force them away. Sillin and the other three pulled the fighter up into the sky, but when they rose to more than 20,000 meters, Knight suddenly remembered something. Before he could speak, his communicator buzzed. The signal had been jammed. Not only that, the fighter's propulsion system had malfunctioned as well. The engine had shut down, and the fighter was falling straight down. Holy shit! Nat cursed. How could he have forgotten about this? Right now, those officers were definitely looking forward to watching them embarrass themselves. All kinds of panic, all kinds of panic, all kinds of despair, all kinds of panic. This was what the officers sitting in the monitoring room wanted to see. During some military pilot selections, something like this would be done to test a pilot's adaptability. After staying at Sector B for a long time, Knight had forgotten about it. Right now, they were in the military's supervision territory, so they were using the military's tricks. However, the other three should be able to handle it, right? You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.